This video covers a real homicide case and contains details some viewers may find disturbing. Seasoned investigators who worked this case, who'd seen countless crime scenes, struggled with severe PTSD afterward. Many needed therapy, and some left law enforcement entirely. This case broke something in people trained to handle the worst of humanity. Viewer discretion is advised.
I prayed for her to come home and to come home safe. Only now do I realize that God took her home to be with him.
You are the monster that creeps beneath your bed. You are the person that's hiding around the corner that everybody warns you about. You are a criminal and you are a murderer and you are never anything that should see the light of day.
He would get very quickly violent. He could turn in an instant and go from being a nice guy to grabbing a woman by the hair and slamming her in the wall and making her have sex.
They may be a symbol to us.
Dozens came together for a candlelight vigil outside Angelina's banquet hall to remember 28-year-old Heather Bogle. Her 6-year-old daughter Mackenzie was front and center, blowing out a candle wish to her mother.
We can't bring her back and we do want justice, but more than that, we just all want to be here and pull together and show how much we cared for her.
I miss most her beautiful smile. Like, she could just walk into a room and light it up. You would have a bad day and she was always there to listen and at least get you to smile.
In April 2015, a crime so brutal unfolded in Sandusky County, Ohio, that it would shatter a quiet working-class town and expose failures in the justice system that allowed a killer to walk free for years. What happened to Heather Bogle, and what investigators found waiting inside the trunk of her car, would become one of the most disturbing murder cases Northwest Ohio had ever seen. The Whirlpool plant in Clyde, Ohio, hums through the night the way it always has. Steady, reliable, ordinary. Washing machines rolling off the line, forklifts moving pallets. The kind of work that keeps a small town alive. The overnight shift is when mothers come in. The ones who need the hours but can't give up their days. The ones who have someone waiting. Heather Bogle clocked out at 6:17 a.m. on April 9th, 2015. Security cameras captured her leaving the factory parking lot, the last confirmed image of her alive. A 28-year-old woman walking toward her car in the early morning light. Another shift done. Another morning she'd get to spend the afternoon with her daughter. 5-year-old Mackenzie was waiting. Heather never missed school pickup. It was the one thing you could count on. But Heather never made it home. She never picked Mackenzie up from school that day. And when the hours stretched into silence where Heather should have been, the people who knew her understood immediately that something was wrong. The next day, April 10th, 2015, investigators found Heather's car sitting in the parking lot of the Somerton Apartments on Hickory Street in Clyde, less than a mile from the factory. Heather had no known reason to be there. The car was locked. Investigators approached it. They checked the interior. Nothing. And then they opened the trunk. Heather Bogle was curled inside, her body positioned in a tight semi-fetal pose, her hands coiled close to her chest. She had been arranged with care. She looked, investigators would later say, like a child sleeping. But she was not sleeping. And someone had made sure she would be found this way. She was curled inside the trunk of her own car, posed like a child sleeping. But nothing about what had been done to Heather Bogle was peaceful, and what this case would become was something no one in Sandusky County could have imagined. Sandusky County sits in northwest Ohio, population just over 60,000, spread across farmland and small towns where everyone knows everyone. It's working class, rural, the kind of place where people stay because their families have been there for generations. Tight-knit doesn't even begin to cover it. This is not the kind of county where violent crime happens. Sheriff Chris Hilton would later describe it plainly. This is not that kind of place. When something like this occurs here, it's a shock. The Whirlpool Corporation plant in Clyde is the economic heartbeat of the region. One of the largest washing machine factories in the world. Thousands of local families depend on it. The overnight shift runs like it always has. Reliable, steady, ordinary. Heather Bogle had worked that shift many times before. April 8th going into April 9th, 2015 was no different. She clocked in at approximately 10 p.m. She worked through the night, and at 6:17 a.m., she clocked out. No security cameras captured her leaving the factory parking lot, the last confirmed image of Heather Bogle alive. After that, silence. Heather had a rhythm to her life that people could count on. She worked overnight so she could be home during the day. She slept briefly, and every afternoon, without fail, she picked up her 5-year-old daughter Mackenzie from school. It was clockwork. She never missed it. So when the school called that afternoon and said no one had come for Mackenzie, when the hours passed and Heather still hadn't shown up, the people who knew her understood immediately that something was catastrophically wrong. Heather's mother, Renee Bogle, and the family reported her missing. The Sandusky County Sheriff's Department launched a search. Within hours, the family was posting signs. Social media lit up with Heather's picture. The community responded the way small towns do, organizing, spreading the word, holding benefits for Mackenzie. "Someone has her," the posts said. "Bring her home." But Heather wasn't coming home. The next day, April 10th, 2015, one day after Heather was last seen leaving that factory parking lot, her car was located. It was sitting in the parking lot of the Somerton Apartments on Hickory Street in Clyde, less than a mile from the Whirlpool plant. Heather had no known reason to be at that apartment complex. She didn't live there. She didn't know anyone there, as far as investigators could tell. But her car was there now, locked and undisturbed. Investigators opened the trunk, and what they found, what had been done to Heather Bogle before someone carefully arranged her body and closed that lid, would reveal a despicable and disturbing level of violence that Sandusky County had never seen before. The investigators would later describe what they saw as something they were not prepared for. Heather Bogle was found in a semi-fetal position, curled tightly, her body positioned with deliberate care. She was wearing an oversized red Mickey Mouse t-shirt, several sizes too large. That was not hers. Her hands were coiled close to her chest. The way she had been arranged, investigators would later say, made her look to some degree like a child sleeping. But what had been done to Heather Bogle before she was placed there told a very different and cruel story. Prosecutors later described the beating as unbelievably awful. Defensive wounds covered her hands and arms, the kind of injuries that come from blocking, from bringing your hands up to protect your face and head. She had fought. She had refused to stop fighting even as she was physically overpowered. The medical examiner confirmed she had been handcuffed, beaten down first, or then restrained while she was still alive. Cause of death was 2 gunshot wounds fired into her back. The bullets penetrated vital organs in her chest. The murderer, the coward, had shot her from behind. Her hair had been hacked off at the scalp. Not cut cleanly, hacked in rough, uneven sections, as if someone had grabbed fistfuls and chopped them away with a blade. Her fingernails had been cut down to the cuticles. A deliberate, methodical act, performed after death. The body had been cleaned. Someone had washed Heather with extreme care after she died, scrubbing away evidence, erasing traces of what had happened and where it had happened. There were no bullet holes in the Mickey Mouse t-shirt, no blood pooling in the trunk. Investigators determined quickly that Heather had not been killed in this car. She had been murdered somewhere else, then transported here and staged. The staging itself was deliberate. The oversized shirt that was not hers, yet the posed position, the coiled hands. Someone had taken time to arrange Heather Bogle's body in a way that created a specific effect. They had made choices about how she would be found. Prosecutor Tim Braun would later frame it clearly. Whoever did this was not acting out of panic. This was not the work of someone overwhelmed by what they had done. This was calculation. This was someone who had cleaned up carefully, methodically, because they did not want to be found. Someone who understood how evidence worked. Someone who had thought this through. Heather Bogle had been beaten, restrained, shot twice in the back, and then someone had taken the time to wash her body, cut away her hair and fingernails, dress her in a shirt that was not hers, and arrange her in the trunk of her own car as though she were sleeping. She was 28 years old. a woman who worked the overnight shift at a factory so she could spend afternoons with her 5-year-old daughter, Mackenzie, who had been waiting for her mother to come home. Heather Bogle had been beaten, restrained, shot twice in the back, and then carefully, methodically, staged in the trunk of her own car as though she were sleeping. Whoever did this had taken their time. They had cleaned up with extraordinary precision, and they had made sure she left nothing behind that could lead back to them. But to truly understand what was truly taken from this world on April 9th, 2015, you have to know who Heather Bogle was before that morning. Heather was born on December 27, 1986, in Rock Hill, South Carolina. She grew up in a close-knit family alongside her siblings, Jennifer and Joshua. Everyone who knew her described her the same way: warm, loving, the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered. She was someone people genuinely wanted good things for. At some point, the family moved to Tiffin, Ohio. Heather adapted. She rebuilt. She kept going. That was who she was. A woman who didn't stop when things got hard. And eventually she arrived at the Whirlpool plant in Clyde. It wasn't a dream job. It wasn't what she wanted forever. But it was a stable foundation, and she was building on it. She worked the overnight shift specifically so she could be home during the day for her daughter. Mackenzie was 5 years old. She was the center of Heather's entire world. Every decision Heather made was for her. The nursing school ambition? That was for Mackenzie. The overnight shifts that left Heather exhausted? Those were for Mackenzie. Heather had built a rhythm to their lives that protected what mattered most. She would finish her shift, sleep briefly, and be there when Mackenzie came home from school. It was their routine. She had built it carefully, deliberately, around her daughter. Because Heather was carrying 2 full lives simultaneously. Factory worker by night, nursing student by day. She had been studying alongside those overnight shifts, pushing herself towards something better. And she had done it. She had finished the nursing course. She was one exam away from the license that would change everything for her and Mackenzie. Then, in April 2015, she failed her nursing board exam. It was a setback, not a surrender. Heather was going to retake it. She was not a woman who stopped. But it hurt, and in the days before her death, the hurt got worse. Her brother sent her a cruel text message calling her too stupid to pass the exam. A wound on top of everything else she was already carrying. There was something else unraveling in Heather's life that spring. Her relationship with Carmela Badillo, Heather's first same-sex relationship. They had been together for about a year. Both worked at the Whirlpool plant. For a time, it had been something real. But by April 2015, the relationship was falling apart. There were explosive arguments, threatening text messages, ugly exchanges that left both of them raw. It was painful. It was messy, but it was not physically violent. It was 2 people who had loved each other and no longer knew how to be in the same room. So Heather, in those final days before April 9th, was alone in a way she hadn't been in a while. Heartbroken, exam failed, relationship ending, dreams on pause. But she was still showing up, still clocking in at 10 p.m., still walking out of that factory at 6:17 in the morning, still going. The morning of April 9th, 2015. Heather Bogle had just finished another overnight shift. She was emotionally exhausted. She was vulnerable, and she was reaching out to whoever would listen, looking for someone to talk to, someone who would understand, someone who could help her make sense of everything that felt like it was falling apart. Heather Bogle was not a woman without problems. She was a woman working through them, the way millions of women do, quietly, stubbornly, for their children. But the morning of April 9th, 2015, she was more vulnerable than she had been in a long time, and someone was watching. The question of who was watching Heather Bogle that morning fell to lead detective Sean O'Connell of the Sandusky County Sheriff's Department. O'Connell was experienced, driven, and authoritative. He took the case, and he ran with it. The first person investigators looked at was Carmela Badillo, Heather's girlfriend, The relationship's ugly final weeks were well documented. There had been threatening text messages, explosive arguments, a blow-up in the days right before Heather disappeared. On the surface, it looked personal. It looked like rage. But O'Connell checked Carmela's phone records. He confirmed her alibi. She was cleared. O'Connell moved on. The next question was harder to answer. Heather's car had been found at the Somerton Apartments on Hickory Street in Clyde. Heather had no known reason to be there. She didn't live there. As far as anyone could tell, she didn't know anyone there. So O'Connell began pulling on the thread of who did live there, and whether any of them had a connection to Heather Bogle. That's when he found Kiona Bohr. Kiona was a single mother who lived in the apartment complex. She worked at a nursing home. O'Connell would later describe himself as licking his chops when he first spoke to her. Police reports described Kiona's behavior during questioning as evasive, reluctant to engage, unwilling to give straight answers. To O'Connell, that read as guilt. And then there was the shirt. Heather had been found wearing an oversized red Mickey Mouse t-shirt, several sizes too large, not hers. O'Connell learned that Kiona owned a similar item. That connection felt meaningful to him. It felt like evidence. But what really locked O'Connell's attention was Kiona's Facebook activity on April 9th, the day Heather disappeared. Kiona had posted twice that day. The first post read, "I can't believe what just happened." The second post, just hours later, said, "Doing 8 to 10 years for murder and pleading insanity." Investigators believed those posts were incriminating. They believed Kiona was confessing. O'Connell wasn't done. He identified a second person of interest, Omar Satchel. Omar had prior convictions for home invasion and firearms charges. More importantly, he had been in Kiona's apartment the night Heather's body was found. O'Connell also believed that Omar sometimes sold Heather marijuana, which meant Omar knew her. And O'Connell developed a theory that Omar had stolen a small-caliber firearm around the time of the murder, possibly the gun used to kill Heather. Then came the third suspect. An informant told O'Connell that a man named Kerry Jeffrey had dumped a black bag containing the murder weapon into a river. O'Connell launched a dive team to search for it. The dive team found nothing, and the river yielded no weapon. O'Connell's theory did not waver. According to O'Connell's reports, he believed he had 3 suspects working together: Kiona Bohr, Omar Satchel, Kerry Jeffrey. A web of circumstantial connections that, in O'Connell's mind, pointed to one conclusion. These 3 people had killed Heather Bogle. He was certain of it. He presented his theory to prosecutors. He pushed for indictments. Sean O'Connell was certain. He had 3 suspects, a web of connections, and a theory he believed in completely. What he didn't know, or didn't want to know, was that the truth had already left its fingerprints on this case. And those fingerprints didn't belong to any of them. But Sean O'Connell wasn't looking for the truth. And the woman whose life he was about to destroy had nothing to do with Heather Bogle's murder. Before April 2015, Kiona Bohr had built something stable. She was a single mother working at a nursing home. She had a home for herself and her kids. Things were going well. She had worked hard to get there. Then Sean O'Connell came for her. O'Connell's team raided Kiona's apartment, going through her home, her belongings, turning her life inside out. But that was only the beginning. The warrant was executed at her workplace, the nursing home where Kiona had built a career taking care of elderly residents. Officers arrived with their guns drawn. Kiona was pulling a resident out of the dining room, getting him ready for bed, when police came through the door with weapons out, in front of the people she cared for, in front of her colleagues, guns drawn. For a nursing home employee accused of murder, that image, armed officers storming a nursing home to arrest Kiona Bohr, became the anchor of what would happen next. O'Connell publicly named Kiona as a suspect. Her name appeared in the newspaper. Her face became connected to the murder of Heather Bogle, and the consequences were immediate and devastating. Kiona lost her job. She lost her apartment. She lost her reputation. People she had never met sent messages to her inbox telling her she was a monster. Telling her that she and her children deserved to die. Her children could not go to school because of the threats. Kiona's world was dismantled piece by piece, her job, her home, her reputation, by the very man sworn to find justice for Heather Bogle. But here's what O'Connell had gotten wrong. The Facebook posts that he had found so incriminating, the ones that read like a confession, had nothing to do with Heather Bogle. The post that said, "I can't believe what just happened," was about something else entirely in Kiona's life. The post that said, "doing 8 to 10 years for murder and pleading insanity," was about her boyfriend, who had just received a mandatory 10-year sentence for a first drug offense. Kiona was expressing outrage at sentencing disparity, that people get less time for murder than her boyfriend got for drugs. It had nothing to do with Heather, and the Mickey Mouse shirt, the key piece of physical evidence O'Connell believed connected Kiona to the crime. Kiona clarified she had owned one Mickey Mouse item in her life. It was a hoodie, not a t-shirt. She had never owned a Mickey Mouse t-shirt. O'Connell's connection collapsed the moment it was examined. There was something else. O'Connell was not a stranger to Kiona's situation. He had previously helped put her boyfriend away for 10 years on the same drug charge she had been posting about. He had targeted her family before, and when investigators later reviewed O'Connell's work, they found something stunning. He had never even asked Kiona if she had an alibi. He was not interested in ruling her out. He was interested in making her fit his theory.
Talk about subsequent interactions that you had with Detective O'Connell after your home was searched.
After my home was searched, he came to I was working at a nursing home at the time. He would come to my job all the time with the whole police force. He had a meeting with all my coworkers at my job.
Did you lose your job?
I did lose my job.
So you were terrified at this time?
Correct.
You were terrified. You eventually had to hire a lawyer, I believe, who then told O'Connell to cease and desist.
Correct, because everywhere I would go to the gas station, he would black me in. I would go.
This is a detective. He would block you in.
He would black me in. I would go to work. He would be at my job. Anywhere that I would go, he would go. So I had to get a lawyer so he would leave me alone.
He taunted you at one point as well.
Correct.
And what did he say?
Pretty much he just continued to talk about my child's father, Julian Kaiser, and I was mad, I was angry, so I'm like, why are you doing this to me? And he's like, well, what are you mad for? Because we locked up your baby daddy?
And that's what he said to you?
Correct.
What are you mad for? Because we locked up your baby daddy?
Correct.
That's how he spoke to you?
Correct.
A journalist named Matt Westerhold of the Sandusky Register had been watching O'Connell for years. Now, Westerhold had documented a pattern of botched investigations and allegations of corruption involving O'Connell and Sheriff Overmeyer. When Kiona came to him and told him her story, Westerhold believed her immediately. He began featuring her case publicly. He questioned the investigation persistently. He became a watchdog that would not let go. Kiona Bohr had lost nearly everything, and the detective who had taken it from her had not found the person who killed Heather Bogle. But what Sean O'Connell had found, and what he chose to do with it, was about to blow this entire investigation apart. What Sean O'Connell had found was evidence. What he chose to do with it would destroy what was left of this investigation. During the course of the investigation, DNA had been recovered from under one of Heather Bogle's fingernails. The kind of sample left by someone who struggled with her, someone who touched her as she fought for her life in those final moments. It was the most important piece of physical evidence in the entire case. The DNA was tested against all three of O'Connell's suspects, Omar Satchel, Kiona Bohr, and Carrie Jeffrey. The results came back. It did not match Omar Satchel, it did not match Kiona Bohr, it did not match Carrie Jeffrey, not one of them. Sean O'Connell received these results. He knew the DNA excluded his three suspects. He had this information in his hands, and then he filed his report to the prosecutor seeking an indictment anyway. He did not include the DNA results. He omitted them entirely. 3 innocent people were nearly indicted for murder on a report that concealed the one piece of scientific evidence that cleared them. O'Connell had been the lead investigator on the Heather Bogle case for 15 months when the omission surfaced. He was placed on administrative leave. He was forced to resign. But it gets worse. Sheriff Kyle Overmeyer, O'Connell's direct superior, the man who was supposed to be overseeing this investigation, was arrested and convicted for stealing drugs from the department's own evidence room. The corruption didn't stop with O'Connell. It went all the way to the top. In June, a letter was sent to the Ohio Attorney General's office requesting assistance with the Heather Bogle case. The Attorney General's office officially took over the investigation. The state had to step in to fix what the county had broken. A new sheriff was elected in 2016, Chris Hilton. He made an immediate declaration. The investigation would be reopened completely. Every lead would be followed without assumption. Every person would be reconsidered. This time, it would be done the right way. Court documents revealed that O'Connell was charged with 7 criminal counts: obstructing official business, dereliction of duty, coercion, unauthorized use of property, 2 counts of tampering with evidence, and falsifying official records. O'Connell appeared on camera, defiant. He denied every charge. He insisted his investigation had been sound. He refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. But the new sheriff's assessment was clear. O'Connell had attempted to indict people for murder who had absolutely nothing to do with it. The new sheriff described it as a combination of tunnel vision, ambition, and personal interest. O'Connell had decided who was guilty and then worked backward to make the evidence fit. He lied. He falsified reports. He chose to bury the truth. While an innocent woman sat in the crosshairs of a corrupt investigation, her life destroyed, her children threatened, her reputation in ruins, the person who killed Heather Bogle was free, walking around, living their life. Because the detective who was supposed to find him had been too fixated on being right to follow the evidence where it actually led. When the system itself becomes the threat, justice doesn't just fail, it becomes another weapon used against the innocent. Sean O'Connell had spent 15 months, 3 innocent people, and the full weight of his badge chasing a theory that the evidence itself had already disproved. Heather Bogle's real killer had been free the entire time. Now, one with a new sheriff and a clean slate, the question was, could they still find him? They could, but it would take starting from zero. The new sheriff, Chris Hilton's approach was simple. No assumptions inherited from O'Connell. Every person was a suspect until eliminated. Every lead would be followed without agenda. Heather Bogle had been dead for nearly 2 years when Hilton's team took over the investigation. The trail was cold, but Hilton was certain this case was solvable. The first step was re-examining everyone O'Connell had looked at. Carmela Badillo, Heather's girlfriend, was cleared again independently. Hilton's team moved on. Then investigators did something O'Connell had never done. They dug into Heather's digital life, her social media, her Gmail account, her GPS history stored in her Google account. And that's where they found it. An electronic trail of GPS coordinates logging Heather's exact movements after she left work at 6:17 a.m. on April 9th, 2015. Sheriff Hilton's team determined that at 6:30 a.m., 13 minutes after clocking out of the Whirlpool plant, Heather's phone placed her at a trailer home a few miles from the factory. The GPS coordinates confirmed the location. Investigators traced the trailer. It belonged to a man named Daniel Myers. Daniel Myers was a Whirlpool employee. He had worked with Heather Bogle on the same shift that very night. He had left the plant at approximately the same time she did. When Sheriff Hilton would later describe the GPS discovery as his aha moment. It was the first time in 2 years that investigators had something definitive to go on. Something that pointed them in a direction that wasn't built on assumptions or tunnel vision. This was data. This was evidence. Investigators knocked on Daniel Myers' door. He was cooperative on the surface, but throughout the conversation he distanced himself. He downplayed knowing Heather. Very limited conversation, he said. Very little interaction. Just co-workers who worked the same shift. That was it. And then Myers said something that made investigators' hair stand up. He asked why they were still investigating this case. 2 years had passed, he said. This case was done. It was cold. They were grasping at straws. He wanted the investigation to feel over. He wanted them to move on.
So we're on the same page of who we're talking about. Right. Heather Bogle, right?
Right.
Okay. Did you know her outside of work at all?
No. I knew nothing about it. It was just very limited chit-chat. Like I said, maybe knew her maybe 3 months. Any conversation I had was when we were on break.
Did you ever know her to have friends in this trailer park?
No, like I said, I really didn't know her very well.
Okay. Did you ever see her back here?
No. I know it's a cold case and you guys are just, grasping at straws trying to figure out.
We're not necessarily grasping at straws. We've been collecting DNA buccal swabs. If that's all the same to you, we would ask you just to submit it's basically a Q-tip. Would you be all right with that?
No, I'm going to pass on that. I don't feel like I need to.
What?
I don't really know the girl or anything like that.
Investigators asked Myers if he would voluntarily provide a DNA sample. Myers declined. He was the first person in the entire investigation, after all the people O'Connell had pursued, after Kiona Bohr had her workplace raided with guns drawn, after Omar Satchel had been publicly named. Daniel Myers was the first and only person to refuse to give DNA voluntarily. 2 days later, investigators returned to Daniel Myers' door. This time, they had a court-issued warrant for his DNA. Daniel Myers had sat across from investigators, looked them in the eye, and told them he barely knew Heather Bogle. Then he told them he would not give them his DNA voluntarily. 2 days later, they came back with a warrant. And 5 days after that, everything changed. Sheriff Hilton's major, Nick Kotsopoulos, walked into the sheriff's office with the DNA results. He delivered the news clinically, without ceremony, telling the sheriff that the DNA belonged to Danny Myers. The sample found under Heather Bogle's fingernail, the nail she had fought with in the final moments of her life, the nail she had used trying to survive, matched Daniel Myers. And then investigators started digging into who Daniel Myers really was. What they found was a man who had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. This man who had told investigators he barely knew Heather Bogle, who had downplayed their relationship as limited, barely there, had donated $125 to the GoFundMe fundraiser set up for Heather's family after her death. He had written a personal tribute message. He called Heather an amazing person. He said he had come to cherish their talks about their children. He said he was distraught that there would be no more of her smile at work. He signed it. He called her Little Missy. He had also signed the registry book at Heather's funeral. He made sure people saw him there, grieving, present, normal. A man who had rehearsed the performance of grief. The man who killed Heather Bogle stood at her funeral and made sure everyone saw him sign the registry. There was more. 2 to 3 days after Heather's body was found, Art, a Whirlpool employee, had sent an email to Detective Sean O'Connell. She told him she knew someone at the plant who was capable of this crime. She told investigators years later that she had been going to name Daniel Myers directly. O'Connell never followed up. At his sentencing, he would claim he could not recall receiving the email. In June 2017, investigators arrested Daniel Myers at the Wooded Acres campground. Investigators searched Myers' trailer. They found new floorboards that had been purchased less than 1 week after Heather's murder. Investigators believe this is where Heather was killed. The original subflooring was likely soaked in blood and evidence. Myers had replaced it. He had built over the truth. They found women's underwear stored in a safe. They found disturbing videos. Myers with multiple women in circumstances investigators described as very disturbing. A man focused on control, domination, and humiliation. Then after Myers' arrest, 10 women came forward with allegations that he had raped them. All of them had stayed silent out of shame. Myers had chosen vulnerable women, women he believed would not speak. His own daughter, Danielle Frisch, said publicly at the time of his arrest, "He's always been a violent man." His own family knew. Prosecutor Tim Braun reconstructed what happened on the morning of April 9th, 2015. Heather Bogle was in a vulnerable state. The nursing exam had failed. The breakup with Carmela was raw. The cruel text from her brother was still fresh. She was emotionally exhausted after an overnight shift. And she went to Daniel Myers' trailer to talk. She trusted him. Braun believes she walked through the door expecting a friend. And he believes Myers came onto her sexually almost immediately. She rejected him. She fought him. Dental records show Myers had a broken tooth fixed by his dentist 3 months after Heather's murder. Braun believes Heather broke that tooth. She fought hard enough to crack his tooth, but Myers physically overpowered her. He beat her into submission. He handcuffed her. He beat her more. Braun believes Myers tortured Heather for an extended period before shooting her twice in the back. And then came the calculated cleanup, the methodical removal of DNA evidence, the washing of her body, the cutting of her hair and fingernails, the careful staging in the trunk. For Prosecutor Braun noted that most first-time killers are overwhelmed by what they have done. They panic. They make mistakes. Daniel Myers was rational. He was meticulous. And that, Braun said, usually takes experience. Daniel Myers had done this before. Investigators were almost certain of it. And if they were right, then Heather Bogle was not the first woman he had destroyed. She was just the first one anyone had looked for. Investigators were almost certain there had been another woman before Heather, and her name was Leanne Sluter. Leanne was Myers' ex-girlfriend, the mother of his son, a woman with a sister, Lorianne Haley, who loved her and knew her well. In 2009, 6 years before Heather disappeared, Leanne was found dead in her home. A single gunshot wound to the chest, a .22 caliber rifle lying in bed beside her. Authorities ruled it a suicide quickly, as Daniel Myers himself had reported the death to police. Case closed. Lorianne Haley never believed it. She had spoken to Leanne just 12 hours before. There was no indication of anything wrong. No cry for help, nothing that suggested her sister was in that place. And Lorianne knew with absolute certainty that Leanne hated guns. She would not allow one in her house. Myers told investigators the gun was for Leanne's protection. Protection from what? Lorianne asked. Was the question that haunted her. There were forensic problems. The rifle's barrel was long enough that it would have been extremely difficult for Leanne to self-inflict the wound to her own chest. The geometry raised serious questions. When Leanne was found, the rifle was lying neatly beside her. No gunshot residue tests were performed on Daniel Myers' hands. No tests were performed on Leanne's hands either. Standard procedure was not followed. Investigators took Myers at his word. And years later, after Myers was arrested for Heather's murder, a suicide note allegedly written by Leanne surfaced. It was found in Daniel Myers' possession in his trailer. He had held it for years. Myers' family claimed they found it after his arrest. The note read, "All I ever wanted was to just die so that the hurt would stop." Lorianne did not believe the note was fully authenticated, and she could not understand why it had only surfaced now, years later, after Myers had been arrested for another woman's murder. The case was reopened. Sheriff Hilton's team looked at it again. They determined that Leanne would have been physically able to reach the rifle's trigger. They reached the same conclusion: suicide. Lorianne Haley never accepted it. Prosecutor Tim Braun had said it. A man who covers up a murder with that level of calculation, the methodical cleanup, the DNA removal, the careful staging, usually has experience. Not their first rodeo. Myers seemed to have it down to a science. The system had a chance to look harder at Daniel Myers in 2009. It didn't. And 6 years later, Heather Bogle paid the price. Lee Ann Sluter's case is officially closed. Officially, it remains a suicide. But her sister has never stopped believing what she knows. And if she is right, then justice for Heather Bogle, however complete, will never be the whole accounting. Now it was time for whatever accounting the law could give. The first accounting came for Sean O'Connell. His trial date was set. He had spent months insisting on his innocence, defiant in every interview, refusing to acknowledge what the evidence showed. But the morning his trial was set to begin, O'Connell entered a guilty plea. 1 felony count, tampering with evidence, not 7 charges. 1. A last-minute act of self-preservation, not conscience. The sentencing hearing took place on September 13th, 2018. O'Connell arrived at the courthouse with his wife and family. He was hoping for probation, preparing for worse. He addressed the court. He insisted he had not intentionally omitted the DNA results from his report. He said he had only been trying to give the prosecutor a sense of why he believed in his 3 suspects. He wasn't trying to hide anything, he claimed. He told the court he was simply doing everything in his power to find those responsible for Heather Bogle's death. Judge Patricia Cosgrove did not accept the framing.
Police officer, whether it's preparing a report for the county prosecutor or a search warrant, you can't just include the things that are favorable or support or bolster your thesis or your opinion as to who committed the crime. It's incumbent on you as a law enforcement officer also to address the weaknesses of your case. And I guess that's another question I have for you. Why did you do that?
Well, Your Honor, when I submitted that report to the prosecutor, it was really nothing more than for the prosecutor to get a feel for why I thought it was these 3 people. These 3 people weren't names that I just drew from a hat. These are 3 people where I had subjects that were coming to me, persons from the outside that were approaching me and telling me and suggesting and indicating why these 3 people were involved. I knew that DNA didn't come back to those 3.
But you didn't put that in the letter to the prosecutor. The DNA didn't come back to Keon or Omar Satchel or the other guy, what was his name? Kyrie Rogers?
Kyrie Jeffries, Your Honor.
Kyrie Jeffries?
Yes.
You didn't want to put that in the letter to the prosecutor. Hey, look, the DNA evidence in this case doesn't, the DNA that was taken off the body of Heather Bogle, none of these people's DNA was on her body or at the crime scene or in the trunk or anything. Now, why didn't you include that?
You're right, Your Honor. I did not include it, and I take full responsibility for that, and for what it's worth, I apologize for not doing that. But again, I did that because I was simply trying to get the prosecutor a feel on why I thought it was these 3 people.
And why did you not say there was a 5.7 mile radius where her last ping came from, which, by the way, would include the trailer park where Daniel Myers, is that his name? Who's now charged with Heather Bogle's murder. And if you look at the longitude and the latitude readings on the pings, they actually ping right to Myers' trailer park. I guess, why did you not disclose this to the prosecutor?
I am not technology savvy, if you will.
I want to talk to you about the emails that you got approximately 3 days and one, I think.
She pressed him directly. Why didn't you include the DNA exclusion in your report? Why didn't you follow up on the Whirlpool employee email implicating Daniel Myers, an email that arrived just 3 days after Heather's body was found? O'Connell's answers were evasions dressed as explanations. He claimed he was not technology savvy. He claimed he could not recall the email. And Judge Cosgrove's words were direct and cutting. You have not only dishonored yourself, Sean O'Connell, you have dishonored all of the thousands of police officers across the country, men and women that get up every day, risk their lives for our good. Then the family spoke. Jennifer Bogle, Heather's sister, addressed the court and said, "He not only failed my sister, but he also failed all of the citizens of Sandusky County." How he can even consider saying that he tried his best to solve her case is completely beyond me. And then Kiona Bohr stood. The woman whose apartment had been raided, whose workplace had been stormed with guns drawn, whose children had been threatened, whose life had been dismantled by the man standing before the judge and said, "I have lost time with my children, time with my family. I have lost friends. I have lost family. I have pretty much lost every single thing that I had because of this man, and I am still trying to get it back." Matt Westerhold, the journalist who had covered O'Connell for years, who had documented the pattern, who had believed Kiona when she came to him, was overwhelmed. He described the sentencing as vindication for the families O'Connell had hurt so badly. It would have been so easy, Westerhold said, to just do the right thing. Judge Cosgrove sentenced Sean O'Connell to 24 months, 2 years, in state prison. He was taken into custody in the courtroom. Sheriff Chris Hilton's assessment was measured but firm. Any time somebody that wears the same badge that he does gets convicted of a crime, they need to pay for it. He believed O'Connell was where he should be. Justice had arrived for the innocent people O'Connell had destroyed. But justice for Heather Bogle was not complete yet. Sean O'Connell was going to prison. But there was still one more reckoning left. The man who had actually killed Heather Bogle, the man who had attended her funeral, signed her registry, and donated money to her family, was about to face a courtroom of his own. Daniel Myers' trial was set to begin. Prosecutor Tim Braun was confident. They had more than enough. DNA under Heather's fingernail. GPS records placing her at his trailer 13 minutes after she clocked out. The new floorboards purchased less than a week after her murder. The pattern of predatory violence against 10 women. His own daughter's words. The evidence was overwhelming. Myers had been held in Sandusky County Jail since his arrest in June 2017. Denied bond. Watching the evidence accumulate against him for nearly 2 years, he faced a choice. A trial with the possibility of the death penalty, or a guilty plea. On February 13, 2019, Daniel Myers entered his guilty pleas: aggravated murder, kidnapping with sexual intent. He confirmed in court that he understood a guilty plea was a complete admission of guilt. His voice wavered slightly. He looked down at the table. He rubbed his head. He said nothing that was not required of him. At sentencing, Myers was classified as a sexually violent predator, a classification he will carry for the rest of his life. The families spoke. Carmela Badillo, Heather's girlfriend, the woman O'Connell had once suspected, addressed Myers directly and said, "You are the monster that creeps beneath your bed. You are the person that hides around the corner that everybody warned about. You are a criminal and you are a murderer. You should not see the light of day." Heather's mother, Renee Bogle, had written a statement. Victim advocate Carly Fairbanks read it in court. "I prayed for her to come home, and to come home safe. Only now do I realize that God took her home to be with him. And then, I hope she haunts you for the rest of the days that you are breathing, because you deserve that." When given the opportunity to speak, Daniel Myers said, "I have nothing to say." Judge John Dewey responded to Myers' silence. "I thought there might be some exhibition of remorse. I've seen none." Pretty sad commentary. Pretty sad. Judge Dewey delivered the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Daniel Myers will never be free. He is currently serving his sentence at Lorain Correctional Institution in Ohio. Sheriff Chris Hilton spoke at the news conference afterward. He's not going to be able to hurt anyone again. He will never ever see the light of day as a free person. Knowing the job was done correctly, Hilton said, "I meant 2 things. A monster put away for the rest of his life, and a family that could properly grieve and begin to remember the young woman they loved." And so, the narration turns. Away from Daniel Myers. Away from courtrooms and sentences and the machinery of justice that took 4 years to finally arrive. It turns back to Heather, the overnight shift at the Whirlpool plant, the hum of the factory floor, a mother finishing her work at 6:17 in the morning, Art walking out into the early morning light. Mackenzie waiting at home. The nursing license Heather was one exam away from earning. The better life she was building. Every afternoon she carved out for her daughter while the rest of the world was asleep. Mackenzie was 5 years old when her mother clocked out for the last time. She went to live with family. She grew up knowing her mommy was an angel. Heather Bogle was warm, stubborn, hard-working, always reaching for something better. A woman who deserved more years than she got. She clocked out at 6:17 in the morning, the same as always. A mother on her way home. Heather Bogle deserved more years than she got, and the least the rest of us can do is remember exactly who she was. Thank you for remembering Heather Bogle with me. If this case meant something to you, please share it so her name will always be remembered, and so others can remember her too, so they can remember that Heather Bogle, a woman, a daughter, a sister, and a mother, once walked this earth. Subscribe for more cases like this, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for staying till the end with me, and I'll see you in the next video. This video covers a real homicide case involving the shocking disappearance of a pregnant woman that shattered an entire community and revealed a twisted double life that left even veteran detectives stunned. Viewer discretion is advised.
Laura, if you're listening, it doesn't matter what's happened, it doesn't matter what type of trouble. There's nothing we can't fix together. Myself and your family. There's so many people that miss you. There's so many people that were out. We haven't slept. We haven't eaten. We're just looking. And we're praying that you're safe. And I'm asking to just let us know that you're safe. If somebody has her, please understand that you've taken away a huge person in so many people's lives. She was super excited for start of the school year. I know she had talked to her principal and her teachers, like her coworkers, about her being pregnant.
In September 2017, Maryland was rocked by a case that seemed impossible. A beloved teacher of the year, 4 months pregnant, vanished on the eve of the school year. What investigators would uncover wasn't just a crime, but a decade-long web of deception so elaborate that prosecutors would later call the perpetrator a psychopath and a coward. A photograph of rolling Maryland countryside, green fields stretching toward distant hills, September sunlight filtering through trees, beautiful, peaceful. A woman sent a text message with just 2 words, Sunday Adventure. The woman who sent that photo was Laura Wallen, 31 years old, social studies teacher at Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland, 4 months pregnant and glowing with anticipation about becoming a mother. The text went to her sister Jennifer, her best friend, her confidant. The photo captured a moment of pure happiness. That photograph would be the last her sister would ever receive. 2 days later, Laura's phone would send strange text messages, misspelled words, out-of-character phrases. Her sister knew immediately. Someone else was texting. But who and where was Laura? Tuesday, September 5th, 2017. The first day of the school year. Wild Lake High School buzzing with excitement. But in room 142, something was wrong, and the classroom stood ready, desks arranged in perfect rows, bulletin boards decorated with historical figures, name cards placed carefully on every student desk. Everything prepared, everything waiting. Laura Wallen, Teacher of the Year 2016, known for her dedication, beloved by her students, never arrived. Something was terribly wrong. Laura Wallen had vanished, and no one knew where to find her. To understand what was lost, you have to understand who Laura Wallen was. Room 142 at Wild Lake High School in Columbia, Maryland, wasn't just a classroom. It was a sanctuary. Laura had spent weeks transforming the space. Bulletin boards featured historical figures alongside inspirational quotes. Name cards, each handwritten, sat on every student desk. The walls told stories of American history, government, and current events, all carefully curated to make learning come alive. Laura Wallen was a social studies teacher, but to her students, she was so much more. In 2016, her peers and students voted her Teacher of the Year. Laura had a gift for making complex topics accessible. Students didn't just take her class because they had to. They requested it specifically. Room 142 was known throughout the school. She stayed after school when students struggled. She remembered birthdays, asked about family situations, noticed when something was wrong. One former student would later say that Laura made you feel like you mattered, like your presence actually meant something. Beyond the classroom, Laura was a daughter, a sister, a best friend. 31 years old, daughter of Mark and Gwen Wallen. Her sister Jennifer wasn't just family. She was Laura's confidant. They texted daily, shared everything. The Wallens were tight-knit, the kind of family that gathered for regular dinners and communicated openly. And Laura was 14 weeks pregnant, glowing with anticipation about becoming a mother. She'd been preparing, reading parenting books, setting up a nursery. The baby was a boy. Her family would later name him Reed. And everything pointed toward a bright future, a new school year, a baby on the way. But Monday evening, September 4th, 2017, Labor Day, Laura's father Mark went to check on her at her townhouse. What he found stopped him cold. Candles were still burning, left unattended. A fire hazard completely unlike his careful daughter. Laura's dog was inside, alone and anxious. The house looked lived in but abandoned. Her car was gone, a 2011 black Ford Escape. But Laura? No sign. Mark knew immediately. Laura would never leave her dog alone overnight. She would never just disappear. The next morning, Tuesday, September 5th, the first day of school, students arrived at room 142 expecting their beloved teacher. The classroom was ready. Desks arranged, decorations in place. Everything Laura had prepared sat waiting. But Laura never walked through the door. And minutes passed. An hour. School administration called the family, confirming what the Wallens already feared. Laura didn't show up for work. For a teacher who'd never missed an important day, who was reliable and dedicated beyond measure, this meant only one thing. Something was very, very wrong. Laura Wallen was missing, and the clock was ticking. But Laura's phone was still active. And that's where things started to feel wrong. Monday morning, September 4th, while Mark was still trying to process what he'd found at Laura's townhouse, her sister Jennifer received a text message. It came from Laura's phone. The words on the screen should have been reassuring. Instead, they set off every alarm bell in Jen's mind. The message mentioned an ex-boyfriend. Laura claimed she was with him, needed some space to think. She'd be in touch soon. Jen stared at her phone, her stomach tightening. This didn't sound like Laura. Not at all. For one thing, Laura hadn't seen this particular ex-boyfriend in approximately 2 years. She'd never mentioned wanting to reconnect, never brought him up in conversation. And the tone of the message, short, evasive, and cold, was completely unlike her sister's usual warmth and openness. But what stood out most was this. Laura was texting about something serious instead of calling. Laura never did that. Never. The sisters talked daily, sometimes multiple times a day. If something significant was happening in Laura's life, especially something this major, she would call. They would talk it through together, the way they always did. Jen texted back immediately. "Just call me, please." Another text came through, still evasive, still vague. No phone call. Jen tried calling Laura directly, straight to voicemail. She called again. No answer. Again and again, each unanswered call ratcheting up her panic. Something was preventing Laura from calling. Or someone. Jen's instinct screamed at her, "This isn't Laura texting." By Tuesday morning, when the school called to say Laura hadn't shown up, the family's worst fears were crystallizing into terrible certainty. They contacted police and requested a formal welfare check. Officers arrived at Laura's townhouse in Columbia. What they found painted a deeply unsettling picture. The candles Mark had noticed the night before were still burning. Now, over 24 hours later, a serious fire hazard. Laura's dog remained inside, alone, clearly stressed and anxious. Lights were on throughout the house. The coffee pot sat on the warmer, old coffee burnt to the bottom. Mail had been collected and left on the counter, as if Laura had walked in, set it down, and simply vanished mid-routine. Everything suggested someone had been there recently. But Laura herself, gone. And her 2011 black Ford Escape was nowhere to be found. Police took a formal missing person report. An alert went out for Laura's vehicle. Her description was circulated to law enforcement across Maryland. 31-year-old female, pregnant, social studies teacher. Her photo went to local media. According to family members, she was last confirmed seen on Sunday, September 3rd, Labor Day. The family's desperation intensified. They tried everything to reach her. Mark sent a text to Laura's phone telling her that she needed to call him back, and how worried everyone was. But no call came back. Gwen tried calling repeatedly. Voicemail. Always voicemail. Jen sent message after message, pleading for her sister to just pick up the phone and talk to her. Brief text responses trickled back. Vague, evasive, providing no real information. No concrete details about where Laura was or what was happening. And still, no phone call. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Laura's phone was active. Someone was reading their messages. Someone was responding. But that someone wasn't calling, wasn't providing reassurance, wasn't acting like Laura at all. Nothing about the situation made sense. Laura had been thrilled about the school year starting. She'd spent weeks preparing her classroom with meticulous care. She was excited about her pregnancy, glowing with anticipation about becoming a mother. She had close family bonds and communicated with them constantly. Why would she suddenly disappear? Where was her car? Why would she only text and never call? And if she was really with an ex-boyfriend she hadn't seen in 2 years, why wouldn't she just explain that to her family instead of leaving them terrified? The questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive. Laura's phone kept sending texts, but Laura herself had vanished. And with each passing hour, one terrible certainty grew stronger in Jennifer's mind. Someone else was sending those texts. But who? And where was Laura? The police had the same question. And when detectives began interviewing Laura's family about her life, one name kept coming up: Tyler Tessier. Laura had been seeing someone. According to family members, the relationship had been on and off for years. Complicated, sometimes rocky, but ongoing. The Wallens knew Tyler, though they'd had reservations about the relationship's ups and downs. Investigators contacted Tyler immediately. When they asked if he knew where Laura was, Tyler claimed he had no idea. He presented himself as a concerned boyfriend, worried and confused about her disappearance. He told detectives he wanted to help in any way possible. He was willing to cooperate fully with the investigation. Tyler provided his account of the last time he saw Laura. According to Tyler, he'd dropped Laura off at her townhouse Sunday night, September 3rd. He said she'd been upset and emotional. They'd had an argument during the evening. Laura had demanded her house key back from him and wanted him to leave immediately. Tyler told investigators he gave her the key and left. He no longer had access to her home. He couldn't get back in without that key. Tyler also mentioned they'd planned to meet Monday morning at the Nordstrom Cafe in Columbia Mall. It was supposed to be a reconciliation meeting, but Laura never showed up. Tyler claimed he waited, tried calling her phone, voicemail only. No response. He said he'd been trying to reach her ever since, growing increasingly worried about where she could be. The story seemed straightforward enough. A couple's argument, a missed meeting, concern about a missing girlfriend. But then a neighbor came forward with information that contradicted Tyler's account. The neighbor had seen Tyler on Monday afternoon, September 4th, around 2:30 p.m., walking Laura's dog inside her townhouse complex. Walking the dog meant Tyler had been inside the home, and he had access to it. But Tyler had just told police he'd given Laura's key back Sunday night, that he couldn't get into her home without it. If he had no key, how was he walking her dog inside the complex Monday afternoon? Police noted the discrepancy. When confronted, Tyler offered no clear explanation for the contradiction. His story had a hole, and investigators were taking note. Meanwhile, news of Laura's disappearance was spreading throughout Columbia. The beloved pregnant teacher missing from Wild Lake High School. The community responded with immediate action. Our students took the initiative to organize search efforts. They created missing person flyers with Laura's photo, physical description, last known sighting, and contact information. Students canvassed the Columbia area, distributing flyers to businesses, posting them on community boards, sharing them across social media platforms. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Students, teachers, parents, community members, people who'd never even met Laura but were moved by her story. They conducted systematic searches of areas around Columbia. Parks and trails Laura was known to use, parking lots, shopping centers, wooded areas near her home. Everyone searching, everyone hoping to find her safe. The community organized a candlelight vigil at Wild Lake High School, a show of support for Laura and the Wallen family, a demonstration of hope that she would be found alive. Unity in crisis. Laura's family announced a $25,000 reward for any information leading to her whereabouts, any credible tip, any lead that could bring her home. Desperation was mounting. Every hour that passed felt critical. Laura was pregnant, vulnerable, somewhere out there. But Tyler's story about the key didn't add up. The timeline had gaps. The neighbor's account contradicted his claims, and for investigators working the case, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Tyler's story didn't make sense, and investigators were just getting started, and what they found would systematically dismantle every word Tyler had said. Thursday, September 7th, 4 days after Laura disappeared. An employee at Gramercy Place Apartments in Columbia was doing a routine trash check when something caught his eye. A driver's license sitting among the garbage in the dumpster. He pulled it out. The name read, Laura Wallen. He immediately contacted police. The location was significant, less than 1 mile from Wild Lake High School. When officers arrived and thoroughly searched the dumpster area, they found something else. Laura's cell phone, the same phone that had been sending those strange, out-of-character text messages to her family, now discarded, abandoned, no longer active. Someone had deliberately thrown away Laura's belongings. Someone was trying to hide evidence. And then investigators found her car. Laura's 2011 black Ford Escape was located at the same Gramercy Place apartment complex. It had been parked in a deliberate manner, backed into a parking space, and critically, the front license plate had been removed and was missing. The back plate remained attached. It was a clear attempt to avoid identification from front-facing security cameras. The vehicle was immediately processed for forensic evidence. The picture was becoming clearer. Laura's license, her phone, her car, all discarded at the same location, all deliberately concealed. Meanwhile, detectives pulled surveillance footage from a nearby Safeway grocery store in Columbia. The footage from Saturday, September 2nd, between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m., showed Laura shopping. But she wasn't alone. Tyler Tessier was with her. Her multiple camera angles captured them together in the store. This was 1 day before Labor Day weekend, 2 days before Laura disappeared, and it directly contradicted Tyler's vague claims about when he'd last seen her. Tyler had lied about his timeline, but Tyler's lies were just beginning to multiply. When investigators brought him in for another interview, Tyler provided a completely new story. Now he claimed that both he and Laura had been kidnapped by several men. The kidnappers had killed Laura, Tyler said, but they'd spared him because he begged for his life. Detectives were immediately skeptical. There was no evidence of any kidnapping, no ransom demands, no witnesses, no logical reason kidnappers would spare Tyler but kill Laura. The story made no sense with any of the evidence they'd collected. Tyler changed his story again. This time, he claimed Laura had been emotionally unstable. She told him she needed to escape and think, Tyler said. And then came another claim. Tyler alleged that Laura had told him the baby might not be his, that it could be her ex-boyfriend's child. Tyler was trying to cast doubt on his connection to the baby, but investigators knew something Tyler apparently didn't realize they knew. Laura's sister Jen had confirmed Laura hadn't seen that particular ex-boyfriend in approximately 2 years. The timeline made pregnancy by that ex biologically impossible. Another provable lie. But the most damning evidence came from Tyler's cell phone records. Police obtained a warrant and analyzed the data. Tower pings, location history, and a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Tyler had made multiple trips to the same location, a rural area in Damascus, Maryland. The property had a meat processing operation on it. And critically, it was in the same general area as that landscape photo Laura had sent her sister. The Sunday Adventure photo. Tyler had made several trips to this Damascus location. The visits had occurred before Laura disappeared, and they'd continued after she was reported missing. There was no clear legitimate reason for Tyler to be returning to this remote property repeatedly. Not while his pregnant girlfriend was missing. Not while searches were being organized. Not while her family was desperate for answers. Each interview with Tyler yielded a different story. It was a classic indicator of deception, the inability to maintain a consistent narrative. Our investigators documented every contradiction, every shift, every new version of events. The pattern was undeniable. Tyler was lying. But what was he hiding? And what was at that Damascus location that kept drawing him back? Detectives made a decision. Begin active surveillance of Tyler. Track his movements. See if he returns to the Damascus property. The evidence was mounting. Laura's belongings deliberately discarded. Tyler's multiple contradictory accounts. Surveillance footage proving he'd lied. Cell phone records showing a suspicious pattern of repeated visits to a remote location. There were no credible alternative suspects. Every piece of evidence pointed in one direction. The net was closing around Tyler Tessier. Every piece of evidence pointed to Tyler. But investigators had to be absolutely certain before making their move. They needed solid proof, not just suspicion. They needed to know exactly what Tyler was hiding and why he kept returning to that remote Damascus property. But before they could make that move, police decided to try something else. A calculated gamble. A public appeal that would serve a very different purpose than what the cameras would show. Monday, September 11th, 2017. 8 days since Laura Wallen disappeared. 8 days of no contact, no confirmed sightings, no answers. The community was increasingly desperate. Laura's family was exhausted and terrified, and police were planning something strategic. The Montgomery County Police Department announced a press conference. What the public didn't know was that this wasn't just a plea for information. This was a trap. Detectives deliberately invited Tyler Tessier to participate. The purpose wasn't what it appeared to be. Police wanted to observe Tyler's behavior under pressure. Watch for cracks in his facade. Study his body language. His micro-expressions. Any verbal inconsistencies. See how he performed for the cameras. Determine if the scrutiny might elicit a confession or cause him to slip up. Body language experts and investigators would be watching his every move. The press conference was held at police headquarters. Media assembled. Cameras positioned. And then came the heartbreaking visual that would define the day. Laura's parents, Mark and Gwen Wallen, stood before the cameras, visibly distraught, and Tyler Tessier was positioned right next to them. Mark and Gwen still trusted Tyler as Laura's concerned boyfriend. They had no idea police considered him their prime suspect. They believed he was helping with search efforts, that he wanted Laura found safely. They held his hands for emotional support. Tyler sat between them, playing the role of worried boyfriend. He appeared distressed, emotional, and concerned. Tyler faced the cameras and pleaded for Laura's safe return. He referenced the unborn baby, talked about wanting them to be together as a family. He appeared to fight back tears. It was a performance designed for public consumption, and detectives were watching every micro-expression. Mark and Gwen made their own desperate pleas. Mark spoke about their daughter carrying their grandchild. Gwen could barely speak through her tears. Both parents clasped Tyler's hands, drawing strength from the man they believed loved their daughter as much as they did. They begged Laura to come home safely. They just wanted her back. They urged the community to help with the search. Anyone with information was asked to contact police. The $25,000 reward was emphasized. It was devastating to watch. Two parents, desperate for their missing daughter, holding hands with a man police strongly suspected was responsible for her disappearance. Behind the scenes, detectives already had significant evidence suggesting Tyler's involvement. The cell phone records showing the suspicious pattern. The contradictory statements carefully documented. The evidence pointing in one direction. This press conference was a test. Would Tyler slip up under the scrutiny? Would guilt show through his performance? Would he make statements that could later be contradicted? Every word was being recorded. Every gesture analyzed. And after the press conference ended, the investigation continued with renewed intensity. Cell phone records were analyzed in even greater detail. Tyler's phone had pinged repeatedly at the Damascus property. The pattern showed multiple trips to the same rural location throughout the entire time Laura had been missing. While community searches were being organized, Tyler was driving to Damascus. While Laura's family was desperate for answers, Tyler was returning to that field. While Tyler sat at the press conference holding her parents' hands and claiming ignorance, he had already been back to that Damascus location multiple times. The behavior was completely inconsistent with a concerned boyfriend searching for his missing girlfriend. Prosecutors reviewed the accumulated evidence, the cell phone records, the contradictory statements, the suspicious behavior at the Damascus property. Probable cause was firmly established. Search warrants were drafted for the Damascus property. Cadaver dogs were requested and arranged. K-9 units specifically trained in human remains detection. Ground-penetrating radar equipment was put on standby. Forensic teams were assembled. Police knew what they were looking for, and they had a terrible suspicion about what they would find. The dramatic irony was devastating. Tyler had performed innocence for the cameras. Laura's parents had trusted him completely. The public had seen what appeared to be a concerned boyfriend desperate for answers, but investigators knew the truth was about to emerge. The Damascus field would reveal what Tyler had been hiding. His performance at the press conference was just that, a performance, and time was running out for Tyler Tessier. What was he hiding there? The answer was far more twisted than anyone imagined. While investigating Tyler's connection to that Damascus property, police uncovered something that would reframe the entire case. There was another woman. Her name was Christina Wagner. She was a teacher, just like Laura. And she wasn't just Tyler's girlfriend. She was his fiancée. They lived together, had been cohabiting since 2012. A wedding was being planned for October 2017, and Laura had no idea. Tyler had maintained relationships with both women simultaneously for over a decade. His relationship with Laura had been on and off since high school. In 2012, while still involved with Laura, Tyler moved in with Christina. He successfully lived two completely separate lives, different friend circles, different social media presences, masterful compartmentalization. But the lies he told to maintain that separation were chilling. Tyler told Laura that Christina was a nutty stalker, mentally unstable and obsessed with him, someone to pity but ignore. Tyler told Christina that Laura was schizophrenic, delusional, falsely believing they were in a relationship, someone who needed psychiatric help. The truth? Both women were normal, successful, mentally healthy teachers. Neither was crazy or delusional. Tyler had deliberately lied to manipulate both of them, ensuring any contact between them could be dismissed as the ravings of a stalker. Psychological manipulation refined over a decade. And then came the ring. In July 2017, Laura discovered she was pregnant. She told her family the father was Tyler. Then Laura's father, Mark, arranged a meeting with Tyler at Columbia Mall and asked him directly what he intended to do about his pregnant daughter. Tyler told Mark he loved Laura and they were going to get married. He showed Mark an engagement ring. When Mark asked about rumors of another woman, Tyler said he hadn't seen her in years. It was a complete lie. That same evening, Tyler returned to the apartment he shared with Christina and used the exact same ring to propose to her. Christina said yes, and the engagement was announced. Wedding date set for October 2017, 1 month after Laura's baby was due. On August 28, 2017, everything started to unravel. Laura discovered Tyler was engaged to another woman. The discovery likely came through social media. Tyler and Christina's engagement was public. Wedding preparations were underway. Laura's world collapsed. Everything Tyler promised was a lie. Laura contacted Christina directly about Tyler and the engagement. For Tyler, this was a nuclear threat. His entire double life was about to explode. Christina, believing Tyler's lies about Laura being a stalker, wanted to file harassment charges. She contacted police about a restraining order, but there was a problem. A restraining order required a court hearing. Both women would testify under oath. Tyler would have to explain his relationship with both of them. All his lies would be exposed publicly. Tyler refused to pursue the hearing. The real reason was obvious. He couldn't have both women in a courtroom. His decade of lies would explode. And so Tyler began planning. Labor Day weekend was approaching. Christina had a Pennsylvania trip planned for bridesmaid dress shopping. Tyler suddenly developed a convenient knee injury. He couldn't go. So Christina went alone. Laura's family was planning a Labor Day getaway. Laura initially planned to join them, but Tyler convinced her to stay. "Let's have our own weekend," he said. "I'll show you properties for our future house." Laura believed his promises. With Christina out of state, Laura's family out of town, and the Damascus property owner away for the holiday, Tyler knew the property would be empty. He had access. He had an entire weekend alone with Laura. No witnesses. No one expecting to see them. This was meticulously planned. Saturday, September 2nd. Tyler took Laura to dinner, then drove her around rural Damascus, showing her land. "We'll build our house here," he told her. Perfect for our family." Sunday, September 3rd. Labor Day. Tyler drove Laura to the Damascus property. He showed her what he called the perfect spot for their dream house. Laura was excited. She took a photograph of the landscape and sent it to her sister with a caption about their Sunday adventure. It would be the last photo of Laura alive. Tyler saw Laura texting her sister. He quickly took a photo of Laura and sent it to Jennifer too, creating the appearance of normalcy. But Tyler had already decided Laura couldn't leave that property alive. The motive was crystal clear. Laura had discovered his engagement. She'd contacted Christina. Tyler's double life was about to explode. The wedding was scheduled for October. Laura's baby was due in January. A court hearing would expose everything. In Tyler's calculation, Laura had to disappear. He chose Christina and his wedding. He chose to eliminate Laura and their unborn child. Tyler had a motive. He had the means. And he had the perfect plan. Now police knew exactly where to look. On Wednesday, September 13th, 2017, 10 days after Laura disappeared, search warrants were executed. Montgomery County Police mobilized a full team. multiple detectives, forensic specialists, cadaver dogs, K-9 units specifically trained to detect human remains, ground-penetrating radar equipment on standby. The destination was the Damascus property where Tyler's cell phone had pinged repeatedly. The property was rural, isolated, several acres of woods and open fields. It included a meat processing facility where Tyler had worked for years. The owner had trusted Tyler with access. It was the perfect location for concealing a crime. Search teams moved systematically across the property. Woods, fields, outbuildings, every section examined for any sign of ground disturbance. And then investigators found tire tracks. The tracks led toward the back corner of a large field, cutting a path into a wooded area. They were relatively fresh. The tracks led deep into the property, approximately 1.2 miles from the main roadway. An extremely remote section. A deliberate attempt at concealment. The cadaver dogs were deployed, and they immediately alerted. The signal was strong, unmistakable. The dogs had been trained to differentiate between human and animal remains. The handlers knew what the alert meant. A specific spot in a clearing was marked. The area was secured. Excavation protocols were initiated. Upon close examination, investigators could see the ground disturbance. A grave, approximately 10 feet by 1 foot, relatively shallow, and protruding from the earth was purple fabric material. It matched the description of a vest Laura had been wearing. The recovery operation began. Every detail was documented photographically. The forensic team worked methodically, carefully, and then Laura Wallen was found. Positive identification confirmed it. Laura Wallen, 31 years old, approximately 14 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. Her baby boy, whom her family would later name Reed, had never taken a breath. Both mother and unborn child were gone. The medical examiner was called to the scene. The remains were transported for a full autopsy. The preliminary crime scene assessment revealed the cause of death, a gunshot wound, a single shot to the back of the head. The bullet trajectory had entered the brainstem region, execution-style positioning. According to the medical examiner's initial assessment, death would have been instantaneous. The murder weapon was identified as a .22 caliber rifle. The bullet was recovered during the examination, and investigators discovered something critical. The weapon had been taken from a gun safe on the property. The safe belonged to the property owner. Tyler had legitimate access to it. Cell phone records showed that Tyler had called the property owner on Saturday, September 2nd, the night before Labor Day. He'd asked permission to access the safe, which contained firearms. The owner, who trusted Tyler, had granted permission. Tyler had retrieved the rifle the night before Laura disappeared. This was clear evidence of premeditation. At 5:30 p.m. on September 13th, Tyler Tessier was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Under Maryland law, he faced 2 counts, one for the murder of Laura Wallen, and one for the murder of her viable unborn child, Reed. Maryland law recognized a viable fetus in murder charges. Tyler was held without bond. An arraignment was scheduled. Police released an official statement to the media. The statement read, "Tyler Tessier was the last person known to have been with the victim, and we've determined Mr. Tessier is responsible for Laura Wallen's death." The investigation was continuing. Forensic analysis was ongoing. Additional details would be released as appropriate. The community's reaction was immediate and devastating. Hope for Laura's safe return was completely shattered. The confirmation that their beloved teacher and her unborn child had both been murdered sent shockwaves through Columbia. Students at Wild Lake High School were devastated. The school immediately deployed crisis counselors. Grief support services were activated. Community vigils that had been organized in hope now transformed into memorials of mourning. Laura was dead. Tyler was under arrest. But the full horror of what he'd done was still to come. That horror began to emerge as prosecutors assembled their case. Tyler Tessier was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, and as evidence was presented in court filings, What investigators revealed would disturb everyone who heard it. The Damascus property housed an operational meat processing business, a legal, licensed facility that processed wild game and livestock, deer, elk, cattle. And Tyler Tessier had worked at this facility for years, trusted by the owner with significant responsibilities. Tyler's job was to process animals for human consumption. A critical part of that job was the humane euthanasia of animals. Over the years, Tyler had killed hundreds of animals as part of his normal duties. He'd learned the precise anatomy of mammals. He understood the exact mechanics of instant death. He'd been trained in precise shot placement for humane kills. Tyler Tessier was a professional executioner of animals. The most lethal target point on any mammal is the brainstem. A shot there severs the brainstem from the spinal cord, resulting in instant, painless death. Zero chance of survival. No suffering if done correctly. Tyler had learned this through years of animal processing. It was standard technique in humane livestock slaughter. Tyler knew exactly where to shoot for instant death, and he applied that professional knowledge to a human victim. Montgomery County State Attorney John McCarthy laid it out in devastating detail during court proceedings. According to prosecutors, Tyler Tessier didn't just kill Laura Wallen, he executed her. He used the exact same technique he'd used to execute hundreds of animals. He knew precisely where to shoot. He knew exactly how to kill instantly and efficiently. This was not a crime of passion, prosecutors stated. This was practiced professional execution. The comparison was explicit and chilling. At the facility, animals were shot in the brainstem for instant death. Laura Wallen was shot in the brainstem for instant death. Identical technique, identical precision, identical cold efficiency. Tyler didn't panic. He didn't make mistakes. He applied his professional training to killing Laura. As one court filing stated, Tyler didn't just kill Laura. He processed her like livestock, practiced motion, no hesitation, years of experience executing animals, turned on his pregnant girlfriend. The evidence showed Tyler's familiarity with equipment as well. He'd used a skid loader, heavy machinery regularly used at the processing facility, to dig the grave. Tyler operated this equipment as part of his job. The grave was approximately 10 feet by 1 foot, in a remote location 1.2 miles from the road. Professional approach to concealment. And the premeditation was undeniable. On Saturday night, September 2nd, Tyler had called the property owner and requested permission to access the gun safe containing rifles. The owner, who trusted Tyler, granted permission. Tyler retrieved the rifle the night before the murder. He had the weapon ready when he took Laura to the property the next day. Every detail had been planned in advance, but cell phone records revealed something even more disturbing. Between September 3rd and 13th, Tyler had returned to the gravesite multiple times. While Laura was officially missing, while her family was desperately searching, while he sat at that press conference pleading for her return. He kept going back to the location where he'd buried her. And then came Tyler's confession. On September 13th, after his arrest, Tyler was interviewed by police. Initially, he maintained his lies, the kidnapping story, various denials. But eventually, under the pressure of overwhelming evidence, Tyler admitted the truth. Tyler admitted shooting Laura in the back of the head. He admitted burying her in a shallow grave. But then he revealed something even more horrifying. He told investigators he'd gone back to the grave. He'd shot her again. When asked why, Tyler's answer was chilling. He was concerned he had buried her alive. Tyler had executed Laura with professional precision, a shot designed for instant death. But he'd had a moment of doubt, had lingering uncertainty. So he'd returned to the gravesite and fired a second shot to make absolutely certain, rather than call for help, rather than show any humanity. He went back to make sure she was dead. Shot her again while she lay in the grave. Cold, calculated, and methodical. This wasn't heat of passion. This wasn't an emotional breakdown. This was clinical execution followed by verification, like quality control at a slaughterhouse. Prosecutors' characterization was unsparing. This was premeditated, first-degree murder. Tyler Tessier was a practiced executioner. He turned Laura Wallen into just another animal to slaughter. He executed her with the same cold efficiency he'd used thousands of times on animals. A calculating, methodical killer. Or the complete picture was undeniable. Tyler had retrieved the weapon with premeditation. He'd lured Laura to a remote location. He'd shot her in the brainstem using professional expertise. He'd used facility equipment to bury her efficiently. He'd returned to the grave multiple times, and when uncertain, he'd shot her a second time. Every single detail showed this was a practiced, planned execution. Tyler had applied slaughterhouse skills to human murder. Tyler Tessier had executed Laura with practiced precision, but he would never face her family in court, because on the morning of September 6th, 2018, the day his trial was set to begin, Tyler Tessier took one final thing from Laura's family. But first came the morning. Wild Lake High School was reeling. Students were devastated. The school organized a day of remembrance. Students and staff wore black in Laura's honor. Crisis counselors were deployed. Support groups formed for students who'd had Laura as their teacher. Community vigils were held throughout Columbia. On September 30th, 2017, more than 1,000 people attended a memorial service at Lutheran Church of St. Andrew in Silver Spring. The service was for both Laura Wallen and her baby boy, Reed. The family had chosen to acknowledge the unborn child. An overflow crowd stood outside the church. Grief was shared by hundreds. And then came a bittersweet honor. On Wild Lake High School students voted Laura Wallen Teacher of the Year 2017, the second consecutive year she'd received the honor. The first in 2016, while alive. This time, posthumous. Her parents, Mark and Gwen, accepted the award. Mark spoke about it being a proud moment, but one of mixed emotions. They missed her every day beyond description. Meanwhile, prosecutors built their case. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler Tessier faced 2 counts of first-degree murder and life without parole. A trial date was set, September 6th, 2018, exactly 1 year after Laura disappeared. The family steeled themselves. They wanted to hear Tyler explain himself. They wanted him to answer for what he'd done. Finally, they'd get to ask why. Finally, there would be justice for Laura and Reed. On the morning of September 6th, 2018, Tyler woke at 4 a.m. in his detention cell. He showered. He dressed in court clothes. He ate breakfast at 4:45 a.m. Guards noted his behavior seemed normal. Everything appeared routine. At 4:55 a.m., guards conducted a routine cell check. Tyler Tessier was found dead, hanging from a bedsheet tied to the top bunk. Death by suicide. A 10-minute window between checks. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Tyler had died by his own hand on the morning his trial was to begin. The Montgomery County State Attorney's Office called Tyler a psychopath and a coward. He took the coward's way out. He denied Laura's family their day in court. Even in death, he controlled the narrative. He escaped accountability one final time, but it was the family's response that truly captured the moment. And John Cotty, married to Laura's sister Jennifer, gave a statement to media. He reminded his wife of Tyler's pattern. This was his modus operandi, John said. Tyler never showed up for anything important in 10 years. Not birthdays, not holidays, not anniversaries. He missed everything that mattered. And then came the devastating conclusion. Why would he show up today? He stood us up for the last time. The bitter reality set in. There would be no trial, no testimony, no opportunity for the family to confront Tyler. No answers, no formal verdict. The family had been denied the closure they desperately needed. The pattern was complete. Tyler had taken Laura's life. He'd taken their grandchild. and now he'd taken their chance at justice. In death, as in life, Tyler avoided responsibility. In death, as in life, he refused to show up. Even his final act was about control. He denied the family what they deserved. Tyler Tessier tried to silence Laura Wallen, but her voice would echo far beyond his reach, and in ways Tyler could never have anticipated. Laura's parents, Mark and Gwen Wallen, channeled their grief into action. They worked with Maryland legislators to change the law, to better protect pregnant women from violent partners. In 2020, 2 years after Tyler's death, the Maryland state legislature passed the bill with bipartisan support. It was officially named Laura's Law. Under the law, when a pregnant woman is murdered in Maryland, the perpetrator can be charged with 2 counts of murder, one for the mother and one for the unborn child, as separate victims. The law was narrowly crafted to avoid abortion politics, with zero impact on reproductive rights. It specifically targets violence against pregnant women. Laura Wallen's name now protects pregnant women statewide. Her name now means protection, not tragedy. Wild Lake High School established the Laura Wallen Memorial Scholarship for college-bound students, particularly those pursuing education or history degrees. Students Laura never met benefit from her memory. Annual awards are given in her name. Students who had Laura as their teacher still carry her lessons, not just history facts, but life lessons about compassion, dedication, and believing in others. She showed us what it means to truly care, they say. Room 142 at Wild Lake High School continues its educational mission. New teachers have taught there. New students fill the desks each year. But those who knew Laura remember the classroom she decorated with such hope, prepared for students she would never teach. Yet her impact remains in every student she touched. Laura Wallen wanted to teach students about justice and history. In death, she taught them something far more profound, that even from senseless loss, meaning can emerge. That one person's impact echoes forever. Tyler Tessier tried to erase Laura from this world. He silenced her voice, ended her life, killed their child. But he could not erase her impact. Her name now protects other pregnant women across Maryland. Her scholarship helps students achieve their dreams. Her memory inspires those who knew her. Tyler Tessier, a forgotten coward who took the easy way out. Laura Wallen, a remembered teacher whose legacy protects lives. She won in the end. Laura's legacy is visible and real. Not just memory, but action. Not just grief, but change. Her voice echoes in the law that bears her name. Laura Wallen was a teacher, a daughter, a sister, and an expectant mother. Her legacy protects others. Her memory lives on, and her impact is forever. If this story moved you, share this video to help keep Laura Wallen's legacy alive. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell for more in-depth true crime documentaries every week. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.
I don't think she's alive. I hope I'm wrong. I pray every day. I want her to walk in for Thanksgiving or for Christmas.
Tony and Maureen Dwyer now wonder how they move forward.
Without a body, there's no closure. And every morning I wake up, and it's just natural. The first thing I think about is, where's my baby? And we want her back.
The Dwyers say they're not getting answers from police.
It's hard for us to know where to turn in this case because police are doing as much as they can, but it seems there are things that maybe they didn't do that we think maybe they should have.
Kelly was not the only woman victimized by this evil man. Other female victims have come forward to speak out against him. He is a serial sexual predator, as well as a killer. The actions of this devil have shattered so many lives. Our family, the Milwaukee community will never be the same. Our hearts are broken to the core. Our relationships with one another have been pushed to the very limits of endurance in our family and our friends.
In October 2013, a 27-year-old woman vanished from Milwaukee without a trace, sparking an investigation that would grip the community and expose how easily someone can make another person disappear in plain sight. What detectives uncovered would challenge everything they thought they knew about digital evidence and modern surveillance. In 2013, disappearing completely was supposed to be impossible. We all leave digital breadcrumbs, social media posts documenting our lives, text messages to friends and family, debit card transactions at coffee shops, cell phone pings connecting to towers. Every moment creates data. Everyone leaves a trail. But in October 2013, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a 27-year-old woman vanished. Her phone went dead. Her social media fell silent. Her bank account froze. No posts, no texts, no purchases, no pings. She simply stopped existing. In the digital age, that shouldn't be possible. But someone made it happen anyway. Someone knew exactly how to erase every trace. If you're joining us for this investigation, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Let's uncover the truth together. October 12th, 2013. Saturday morning. Lululemon store, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Kelly Dwyer didn't show up for her shift. For anyone else, that might not raise immediate alarm. But for Kelly, her co-workers knew something was catastrophically wrong. The 27-year-old yoga instructor was the most reliable person on the schedule. Always on time, always prepared, always connected. When phone calls went straight to voicemail, concern turned to panic. Friends frantically checked her social media. Nothing. Her last post was dated October 10th, 2 days earlier. No Instagram updates, no Facebook activity, no text responses. For someone who documented every moment of her life online, the silence was deafening. When was the last time you went 24 hours without your phone? Kelly wasn't just a Lululemon employee. She worked 3 jobs: yoga instructor, a retail associate, nanny for a local family. She'd moved to Milwaukee from the Madison area back in 2008. Building a life filled with close friendships and community connections. Active, optimistic, vibrant. Kelly had just celebrated her 27th birthday. She was the kind of person who lit up a room, who always saw the best in people. And now, she'd simply vanished. By Saturday afternoon, her friends weren't waiting any longer. A missing person report was filed immediately with Milwaukee police. Within hours, the community mobilized. Flyers went up throughout the city. Search parties organized. Social media campaigns launched with Kelly's photo plastered across every platform. Local news picked up the story quickly. Kelly Dwyer is missing. Concern rippled through Milwaukee. A young woman, deeply connected to her community, always in touch with friends and family, gone without a trace. No goodbye, no warning, no explanation. But where had Kelly Dwyer gone? The answer would reveal an impossible mystery.
And she did call me on the Wednesday night before her disappearance and said, "I'm not going to stay on the phone long, I'm just walking home from work and I wanted to tell you how much I love you." That was the last time I heard her voice.
And both say it's impossibly frustrating not knowing where she is now.
Constant phone calls from everyone. People don't know what to do. They feel bad for us, that they feel helpless, just like we feel helpless. They want to do something, but they don't know what to do. And they're asking us, what can we do? And we say, we don't know. Just pray. Pretty much pray. Keep praying and keep talking about Kelly and thinking about Kelly and just pray, because at this point, there's not much else we can do.
Milwaukee police then began retracing Kelly's final known movements, and the trail led them back to the night of October 10th. Kelly had been on a date. She'd spent the evening at a restaurant and bar in Milwaukee with a man she'd been casually seeing. They had drinks, shared food, enjoyed each other's company. Around 2 a.m., surveillance cameras captured them leaving together. The relationship wasn't serious, at least not officially. Kelly had met him through online dating about a year earlier. Friends described it as a friends with benefits arrangement. Nothing exclusive. Kelly was actively seeing other men. Her dating app profile still very much active. She was keeping her options open, exploring connections, figuring out what she wanted. But recently, my friends noticed Kelly seemed more hopeful about this particular relationship. She'd mentioned it was starting to take on greater meaning to her. Maybe they could become something more serious, she'd said. She was optimistic. The man she was with that night was 38-year-old Chris Zacco, an IT professional with a successful career. He lived in an upscale apartment building in downtown Milwaukee, Lafayette Place Apartments, 18th floor. When Milwaukee police reviewed the building's surveillance system, they discovered Lafayette Place had extensive camera coverage. Multiple security cameras positioned throughout the building, lobbies, hallways, common areas. The footage showed Kelly entering the building with Chris at approximately 2 a.m. on October 10th. But then, something impossible. Investigators reviewed every camera angle. They checked every exit systematically: front doors, side entrances, loading docks, emergency exits. They watched hours upon hours of footage, scrubbing through every frame from October 10th onward. Kelly Dwyer walked into that building, but she never walked out. Not on camera, not anywhere. Despite extensive surveillance coverage, there was zero footage of Kelly leaving Lafayette Place Apartments. She'd entered on the early morning of October 10th, and as far as the cameras were concerned, she'd simply vanished inside. How does someone enter a building with extensive surveillance and never exit? Where did Kelly Dwyer go? What happened on that 18th floor? Multiple cameras. Zero exits. What happened inside Chris Zacco's apartment on the 18th floor? But first, investigators needed to understand who Chris Zacco really was. On paper, the 38-year-old looked like exactly the kind of person Kelly would be attracted to. Successful in the IT field, Chris worked as a technology professional, the kind of educated, well-paid executive who'd held good positions with major companies throughout his career. He'd relocated to Milwaukee specifically for career opportunities, settling into a nice apartment on the 18th floor of Lafayette Place, an upscale building in downtown Milwaukee. When Milwaukee police detectives first interviewed Chris, their impression was straightforward. Educated, intelligent, successful. A stable professional with a good apartment in a good building. Charming, articulate. The kind of guy who would seem like a catch. He seemed completely normal. Chris was cooperative during that initial interview, his demeanor calm and measured. He confirmed his relationship with Kelly. Casual, nothing serious, friends with benefits. He walked detectives through their evening on October 10th. They went out, came back to his apartment, had drinks. He admitted they'd used cocaine that night. They had sex, he said, then both went to sleep. According to Chris, Kelly left his apartment the morning of October 11th, around 9 a.m. He told detectives he'd heard the door close behind her as she walked out. When pressed about her disappearance, Chris suggested she was probably with other men. After all, she was seeing other guys too, he reminded investigators. But there was a catastrophic problem with Chris's story. No camera footage showed Kelly leaving the building. Not at 9 a.m., not at any time. If Kelly had walked out that morning, the extensive surveillance system should have captured it. But the cameras told a different story than Chris Zacco. Chris claimed Kelly walked out alive. But the cameras told a different story, and what police were about to find would shatter his story completely. Chris had admitted to using cocaine with Kelly that night. That admission gave Milwaukee police exactly what they needed: a legal basis to search his apartment thoroughly. What they found would expose the first cracks in Chris Zacco's carefully constructed facade. The drug evidence was extensive. Lines of cocaine sat openly on the surface of a magazine. Marijuana canisters filled the refrigerator. Painkillers scattered throughout the apartment. Pills of various types. Pipes and other drug paraphernalia lying around. This wasn't casual recreational use. This was evidence of regular, heavy drug consumption. But it was something in the bathroom that caught investigators' attention for a different reason. The shower curtain hung torn from its rod, multiple hooks broken and dangling. Fragments of the curtain liner were damaged, ripped. Why would a shower curtain be violently torn like that? Investigators carefully photographed and documented the damage. The significance wasn't immediately clear, but it was noted. Filed away. Chris was arrested on drug possession charges and brought to Milwaukee Police Station for formal interrogation. And that's when his demeanor shifted completely. Gone was the cooperative, calm professional from the first interview. In his place, someone flip, dismissive, dripping with arrogance and condescension. When detectives pressed him with questions, Chris deflected. When they asked about mental health history, his response was telling. No bipolar, no schizophrenia. That's all open to interpretation. He was minimizing, deflecting. The interrogation became increasingly contentious before ending abruptly. Later, Chris sent a text message to detectives. He referenced the security footage. The fact that Kelly doesn't appear on the exit cameras. He tried to explain it away. Maybe she met someone else in the building. Maybe she left with one of the other guys she was seeing. She was dating multiple people after all, he reminded them. But investigators weren't buying it. Their suspicion was growing with every excuse, every deflection, every inconsistency. They obtained a warrant for Chris's cell phone. They needed to see what was on that device. Investigators were about to discover what was on Chris's cell phone, and it would expose a pattern of dangerous predatory behavior. When Milwaukee police executed the warrant on Chris Zacco's cell phone, forensic analysts then began combing through the device's contents. What they discovered would fundamentally change the entire investigation. Buried in the phone's files was a video, recorded approximately 3 weeks before Kelly vanished. The footage showed Kelly and Chris engaged in a sexual act. But this wasn't consensual intimacy. Kelly appeared in visible, obvious distress. She couldn't breathe. She was straining for breath, struggling during the act. The video raised immediate, horrifying questions about consent and safety. Prosecutors would later describe the footage as showing dangerous, reckless sexual behavior, the kind that puts someone's life at risk. But the video wasn't the only disturbing evidence on Chris's phone. Investigators found multiple photographs. Image after image showed Kelly appearing completely unconscious on Chris's bed, seemingly passed out, incapacitated, unable to consent. Chris had photographed her in these vulnerable states, documenting her helplessness. It was a disturbing collection that revealed a pattern, photographing women when they were at their most defenseless. Police couldn't link the video or photos directly to what happened on October 11th. The video had been recorded weeks earlier. But what the evidence did establish was undeniable. A pattern of dangerous, reckless sexual conduct. Sexual behavior that placed Kelly at serious risk. Behavior that could cause harm or death. A complete disregard for his partner's safety. The pattern became crystal clear. Chris Zacco was engaging in extremely risky sexual acts. Kelly had been shown in distress, unable to breathe properly. He'd been photographing women when they were unconscious and vulnerable. Behind the successful professional facade, behind the charming demeanor and nice apartment, was predatory behavior. A secret life of sexual violence carefully concealed from public view. Prosecutors analyzed the evidence and reached a chilling conclusion. This was reckless sexual conduct that demonstrated a complete disregard for human life. Actions that could cause serious injury or death. This evidence would become the foundation for murder charges. The video showed a terrifying pattern. But was Kelly still alive? Investigators were about to get their answer. And the evidence was mounting. Torn shower curtain hooks in the bathroom. No exit footage despite Chris's claims. Disturbing video showing dangerous sexual behavior. A clear pattern of reckless conduct. Milwaukee police made a critical decision. Bring in a specially trained cadaver dog. The dog was trained to detect one thing: the scent of human decomposition. The search was methodical and systematic. The cadaver dog worked through Chris's apartment, the building's common areas, and finally, Chris's vehicle. What happened next would transform the investigation completely. Alert after alert after alert. The dog signaled in the hallway outside Chris's apartment door, along the path from the apartment to the elevator and stairs, in the parking garage at Chris's assigned parking level, near the dumpster access door on the 18th floor. Yes, inside the apartment, the alerts continued. The guest bedroom, the guest bathroom, right where that torn shower curtain had been found, the master bedroom, throughout the living spaces. But the strongest, most vigorous alerts came from one location, Chris's bed in the master bedroom. The dog gave its final formal trained alert directly on top of the bed where Chris claimed he and Kelly had simply gone to sleep. Then, investigators examined Chris's vehicle. The cadaver dog alerted on the car trunk interior, the trunk door handle. The scent of human decomposition was unmistakable, consistent, undeniable. A detective would later describe the moment. That changed this case forever. Kelly Dwyer had not left that apartment alive. Her body had been in that apartment, on that bed, in those rooms. It had been moved through the hallway, taken down to the parking garage, placed in Chris Zacco's car trunk. This was no longer a missing person case. This was now a homicide investigation. Milwaukee Police Major Crimes Unit took full control. Forensic teams processed the apartment extensively, documenting and photographing every item, collecting every piece of potential evidence. Chris's vehicle was impounded for forensic examination. During the search, investigators found an external hard drive. Forensic analysis revealed disturbing content. Child pornography. Chris claimed the hard drive was from a former workplace, denying any knowledge. He was arrested on multiple charges, including possession of child pornography. Kelly was most likely dead. The cadaver dog proved it. Her body had been in that apartment, in that car trunk. But now, the $1 million question was, how did Chris get her body out of a building with extensive camera surveillance? The answer to how Chris transported Kelly's body would come from someone who knew him intimately, but knew nothing about Kelly at all. As Milwaukee police investigated deeper into Chris Zacco's life, they made a shocking discovery. Chris had been in a serious, committed relationship with another woman. Not casual dating. A long-term relationship that had been ongoing for years. And this woman knew absolutely nothing about Kelly Dwyer's existence. Chris had completely compartmentalized his life, living two entirely different realities. Police interviewed the girlfriend and showed her photographs taken during the apartment searches. They asked her to review them carefully, to identify anything that looked different or missing. What had changed since she'd last been there? Her answers were revealing. The bathroom shower curtain, now torn and damaged. That explained the broken hooks investigators had documented. Prosecutors would later theorize it had been used to wrap Kelly's body. The bathroom rug that was always there. Gone. The decorative towels. Gone. All the bathroom textiles and fabrics had been stripped from the apartment, removed to eliminate evidence. But it was her next observation that broke the case wide open. A large silver-gray travel golf bag. The girlfriend told investigators it had been sitting in front of the TV for weeks. Substantial in size, approximately 2 to 2.5 feet wide with a padded interior. She and Chris would literally step over it constantly to get around the apartment. It was just always there, part of the furniture, now completely missing. An investigator asked the critical question, could Kelly's body have fit inside that golf bag? Her answer, absolutely. The prosecution theory crystallized. Kelly's body had been wrapped in the shower curtain, placed inside the golf bag, then carried or wheeled out of the building. To anyone watching, it would appear completely normal, just a resident taking sports equipment out. And Chris had advantages. Lafayette Place apartments didn't have elevator cameras. He could transport the golf bag via elevator or stairwell without being filmed. In the parking garage, the cameras were motion activated. Investigators believe he either got lucky, knew the camera blind spots, or the cameras simply didn't activate during his movements. A security guard wouldn't question a resident with a golf bag. It was a common, unremarkable sight. The depth of Chris's deception was staggering. A secret girlfriend of multiple years, completely unaware Kelly existed. An entire relationship kept hidden. His life perfectly compartmentalized. As one detective assessed, he was living two different lives. For his public persona, he was a successful IT professional, devoted boyfriend. And his private reality, a predatory behavior, dangerous sexual conduct, murderer. The perfect facade was crumbling, revealing the predator beneath. The golf bag theory explained how he transported her body. But when did Chris move Kelly's body? And where did he take her? But before we follow that timeline, there's something crucial to understand. The warning signs had been there all along. Kelly's friends had noticed concerning signs about Chris Zacco. Multiple people felt uncomfortable around him, sensed something was deeply off about the relationship. They expressed their concerns directly to Kelly. She brushed off their worries every time. One friend's reaction was particularly telling. During a social gathering with Kelly and Chris, she experienced a sudden, overwhelming urge to leave. She later described feeling bad energy, a visceral sense of danger. Her instinct was screaming that something was wrong. She left abruptly. Later, she would wish she'd been more insistent with Kelly, more forceful about her concerns. But the most visible warning signs were physical. Friends noticed bruising on Kelly's body, marks on her wrists, bruising around her neck area. When they asked about the injuries, Kelly laughed it off as a crazy night. She made light of the bruises, dismissed their concerns quickly, changed the subject when pressed. Just fooling around, she told them. Nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, Kelly continued actively dating other men. Her profiles remained active on dating apps. She was seeing multiple people, keeping her options open. Friends wondered if Kelly was subconsciously sensing danger, maintaining other connections as a safety net, some unconscious part of her recognizing she needed an exit strategy. In hindsight, the tragic pattern is heartbreakingly clear. Friends deeply regret not pushing harder, not being more forceful. How many of us dismiss red flags in those we care about? It's easy to see the pattern now. The warning signs were visible, but Kelly trusted Chris. She wanted to see the best in him. The violence was already happening, hidden behind rough sex explanations. Friends' instincts were absolutely correct. Kelly's optimism and trust kept her from seeing the danger. Those bruises on her wrists and neck weren't from fooling around. They were warning signs of what was to come. Kelly had ignored the warnings. Now investigators would piece together exactly what happened after she entered Chris Zacco's apartment for the last time. Milwaukee police spent months painstakingly reconstructing exactly what happened after Kelly entered that apartment. Surveillance footage from Lafayette Place was reviewed repeatedly, frame by frame. Cell phone records were subpoenaed and analyzed. Credit card transaction records obtained. Every movement documented. Investigators built a minute-by-minute timeline of October 11, 2013. And what emerged was chilling. At exactly 10:08 a.m., Kelly Dwyer's cell phone stopped transmitting its signal. The phone went completely dead. No more pings to cell towers, no more digital trace. Investigators theorized Chris destroyed it, powered it completely down, or disposed of it. The Milwaukee River ran nearby. Kelly's phone was never recovered. Her digital trail ended at 10:08 a.m. Just 16 minutes later, at 10:24 a.m., surveillance footage captured Chris at the parking garage. He was standing near his vehicle, the trunk open. investigators observed a small gray-silver object visible in the footage. A detective's assessment, consistent with a travel golf bag. The theory: Kelly's body was already inside that golf bag, already in the trunk. Over the next 8 hours, surveillance showed Chris making trip after trip from his apartment to the garage, loading various items into his vehicle: bags, boxes, materials. Investigators believe he was methodically cleaning the apartment, removing evidence, disposing of items that could link him to Kelly's death, all while her body remained in the trunk. At 6:16 p.m., Chris finally left Lafayette Place Apartments, driving away with Kelly's body still concealed in his trunk. Where was he going? At 6:30 p.m., Chris arrived at his mother's residence. He told her he was dropping off summer sports equipment, golf clubs, baseball equipment to store. He stayed briefly. His mother would later tell investigators nothing seemed unusual about the visit. But the critical question was, did he leave the golf bag with Kelly's body there? His mother's statement was clear. She never saw any golf bag during that visit. The investigators' theory was that the golf bag, with Kelly's body inside, remained in Chris's trunk. Analysis of Chris's cell phone records revealed something else deliberate. During critical time periods, his phone was turned completely off. No location pings, no tower connections. Investigators believe the phone was intentionally powered down to avoid creating a digital trail. He knew exactly what he was doing to avoid detection. Chris had Kelly's body in his trunk, but he couldn't store it at his apartment building or his mother's house. So where would he spend the night? He spent it at his secret girlfriend's house, the woman who knew nothing about Kelly Dwyer's existence. Chris was scheduled to arrive at her house for dinner at 7:30 p.m. It was their regular evening together. But Chris didn't show up until 8:45 p.m., 75 minutes late. His girlfriend noticed the unusual tardiness. Detectives would later theorize those 75 minutes were spent scouting possible body disposal locations, driving through rural areas surrounding Milwaukee, looking for isolated, secluded spots, searching for where to dump Kelly's body. When Chris finally arrived, his girlfriend immediately noticed something was wrong. He appeared noticeably ruffled, nervous. His demeanor was agitated, completely unlike his normal self. He kept fiddling constantly with his cell phone, claiming it wasn't working properly, and making excuses about technology issues. Something seemed off. Chris stayed overnight at her house that night, and just outside, parked in front of the residence, sat his car. Kelly Dwyer's body remained locked in the trunk. That night, Chris was extremely restless. He couldn't sleep. He sweated profusely through the bed sheets, so much that his girlfriend had to change the bedding during the night. She would later describe it as very unusual behavior for Chris, completely out of character. He'd never exhibited anything like this before. Investigators would later assess the situation bluntly. Kelly Dwyer's body was absolutely in that trunk, parked outside all night long. Chris was psychologically falling apart. The guilt, the fear, the stress, all manifesting physically through profuse sweating and restlessness. He couldn't leave Kelly's body in his apartment. That would be the first place police would search. But Saturday morning, October 12th, was fast approaching. Time was running out. He had to dispose of the body. Saturday morning, October 12th, arrived. Chris had to dispose of Kelly's body, and what he did next would create a trail investigators could follow. When Chris left his girlfriend's house that Saturday morning with Kelly's body still concealed in his trunk, he drove west, away from Milwaukee, heading into rural Wisconsin. His destination, a cheese shop called the Mouse House, located in the countryside west of Madison, approximately 80 miles from Milwaukee. A small specialty shop surrounded by farmland and wooded areas. At 9:55 a.m., Chris entered the shop and made a purchase. Half a pound of cheese. He paid with a credit card, creating a time-stamped receipt. Investigators would later ask the obvious question, why would someone drive 160 miles round trip for half a pound of cheese? The investigative theory was clear. Chris was disposing of Kelly's body in rural Wisconsin. The Mouse House area offered everything needed: farmland, wooded areas, isolated roads, or endless potential hiding places. Remote, rarely traveled terrain, perfect for body disposal. Then he established an alibi by making a purchase with his credit card, creating a paper trail. I was just buying cheese. Next, Chris drove to a Sports Authority sporting goods store in a shopping center area. At 12:11 p.m., he purchased a new pair of sneakers, again using his credit card. Investigators theorized he was replacing sneakers contaminated with evidence, disposing of shoes that had walked on the body disposal site, shoes that might contain soil or biological evidence from the dump location, getting rid of evidence, replacing them with new, clean, identical shoes. But it was the time between those two purchases that exposed everything. The distance between the Mouse House and Sports Authority, 54 miles. Expected drive time at normal speed, 47 minutes. Actual time between Chris's purchases based on credit card receipts, 2 hours and 16 minutes. 90 minutes completely unaccounted for. A detective's assessment, more than enough time to find a secluded spot and dump a body. Time to drive off main roads, find an isolated location, dispose of Kelly's remains, return to the main road, and continue to Sports Authority. The credit card receipts created a documented timeline. Mouse House at 9:55 a.m. Sports Authority at 12:11 p.m. An apparently innocent shopping trip, just buying cheese and new sneakers. But that 90-minute gap told a very different story. A time period where Chris was completely unaccounted for. No receipts, no witnesses, no surveillance. The theory: Kelly's body was dumped somewhere between those two locations, on rural Wisconsin farmland, a remote wooded area off the main roads, isolated enough that there were no witnesses. As one detective noted, finding that exact spot would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Thousands of acres of rural land, countless possible locations. Investigators had the timeline. They had the theory. They had the 90-minute gap. But without Kelly's body, they couldn't charge Chris with murder. Not yet. And because of this, the Milwaukee County prosecutors faced an agonizing dilemma. They had overwhelming circumstantial evidence, cadaver dog alerts throughout Chris's apartment and vehicle, a suspicious timeline with unexplained gaps, the missing golf bag identified by his girlfriend, video showing a dangerous sexual pattern. But Wisconsin law presented an obstacle. They couldn't charge murder without recovering Kelly's body. They would have to wait. In November 2014, approximately 1 year after Kelly's disappearance, Chris went to trial on different charges: child pornography and drug possession. The evidence came from materials found on the external hard drive and drugs discovered during the apartment search.
Curtis Samandel was on the jury that convicted Zacco in 16 of the 17 counts of child porn. He hopes Zacco gets the max.
I hoped that they would actually be able to plea bargain it down and get him to tell where Kelly's body actually was.
The case moved Samandel and another juror so much they showed up to the sentencing.
It was really sort of a closure to a story, a bad story.
But the final chapter is yet to be written. The state filed a more than 50-page document yesterday. The defense said that wasn't enough time for them to review it.
We're not delaying this because there's some grand plan. It's simply a matter of allowing Mr. Levine and myself to be fully informed.
Family and friends of the Dwyers wore silver ribbons in court. They vow to return.
You've got to sometime be able to come up with a body and be able to put it in the ground and have closure. They don't have that yet. He knows where she is, in my opinion.
The sentencing been moved now to the last Friday of this month. Zacco's family and attorney left here with no comment. Reporting live at the Milwaukee County Courthouse, Michelle Fiore, today's TMJ4.
Michelle, thank you very much.
The trial proceeded in Milwaukee County Circuit Court. Chris was convicted on the child pornography counts. He pleaded guilty to the drug possession charges. Combined sentence, 19 years in prison. Chris Zacco was incarcerated, but the murder investigation remained officially open, still hanging over him. Milwaukee detectives hadn't given up the search for Kelly's body. Meanwhile, Kelly Dwyer's family and friends waited in painful limbo. Where was Kelly's body? Would she ever be found? They were trapped in the worst kind of uncertainty, a missing person case with no closure, no final goodbye, no place to mourn. Months passed, then more than a year. 18 months went by, and then, 18 months after Kelly vanished, a discovery in rural Wisconsin would finally provide answers. April 2015. 18 months after Kelly Dwyer vanished. A local resident was walking along an isolated rural road in Jefferson County, Wisconsin. A dead-end country road, rarely traveled, approximately 40 to 50 miles west of Milwaukee. Remote, wooded, far from everything. The walker noticed something unusual. A glint of reflected light catching through the trees in a wooded area off the road. Something white, barely visible through the brush. Curiosity pulled them closer. They walked into the wooded area for a better look, and then they realized what they were seeing. A human skull. They immediately contacted the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. Deputies responded, securing the area as a potential crime scene. A forensic team was dispatched. The medical examiner was called. Skeletal remains were carefully documented, photographed, and recovered from the site. The remains were transported to the medical examiner's office. A forensic odontologist conducted dental records comparison. 6 days after the discovery, the analysis was complete. The dental records matched definitively. Confirmed. Kelly Dwyer. Milwaukee Police Department was notified immediately. 18 months of waiting was finally over. The location was significant. The body was found approximately 6 miles from Interstate 94, in the rural area near the Mouse House Cheese Shop. Within the exact region where Chris had those 90 unaccounted minutes on October 12, 2013. The investigator theory was confirmed. He disposed of Kelly's body during that gap between the cheese shop and Sports Authority. But it was the condition of the skeletal remains that provided the most chilling confirmation. The medical examiner documented the body's position. The skeleton was found in an unusual, completely unnatural position. Feet and legs positioned in one area. One leg completely turned, twisted. Left arm positioned unnaturally behind the back. Upper body contorted. The forensic analysis conclusion. Body positioned as if she'd been scrunched into a container, consistent with being compressed into a small space, like a golf bag. The golf bag transportation theory was confirmed by the skeleton's position. At the scene itself, there was no physical evidence beyond Kelly's remains. No shower curtain, no bathroom towels, no clothing, no golf bag. Chris had successfully disposed of all the evidence materials, leaving only Kelly's skeletal remains behind. The medical examiner faced a limitation. Cause of death was medically undeterminable. After 18 months of outdoor exposure, weather, animals, natural decomposition, only skeletal remains survived. No soft tissue remained. The examiner couldn't definitively determine how Kelly had died. There was no obvious trauma to the bones themselves, but the body's position told the story of concealment. Everything aligned. The body was found precisely where the timeline predicted. The location matched the 90-minute gap theory perfectly. The contorted skeleton position confirmed the golf bag method. All investigative theories aligned with the physical evidence. The circumstantial case had just become significantly stronger. Kelly Dwyer had been found. The theories had been confirmed. Now prosecutors could finally seek justice.
Today, Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm and investigators from both Milwaukee and Jefferson counties met to discuss evidence and where the investigation goes from here.
There's a lot of work to be done still, and we don't have a lot of answers.
As investigators continue their work, friends and family remember Kelly.
I'm sure it's such a relief to her family to at least have some closure so they can start their healing process.
The location raised immediate questions. The site was remote, away from neighborhoods and traffic, a place chosen not by chance, but by intention.
Now that the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office now had the final evidence they needed, which was Kelly's body, they made a very strategic decision. There would be no rush to file murder charges. Because Chris Zacco was already incarcerated and serving 19 years on child pornography and drug convictions, there was no risk of him fleeing. The murder case was too important to rush. Prosecutors wanted every piece of evidence absolutely perfect. For 2 additional years, from 2015 to 2017, the investigation continued. Forensic experts reviewed all evidence again. The timeline was verified and re-verified. Every witness was re-interviewed. Methodically, prosecutors built a circumstantial mountain, a case that didn't require a definitive cause of death, focusing instead on reckless conduct and the elaborate cover-up. In 2017, on 2 years after Kelly's body was discovered and 4 years after her death, formal charges were filed. Chris Zacco was charged with Kelly Dwyer's murder in Milwaukee County Circuit Court. The specific charges: first-degree reckless homicide, not premeditated murder, but reckless conduct causing death, hiding a corpse, concealing her body and impeding the investigation, strangulation and slash or suffocation, the method of death based on the pattern of evidence. The prosecution's theory framework was clear. They weren't arguing Chris planned to kill Kelly. They were arguing he killed her during a reckless, dangerous sexual act, similar to the video from 3 weeks earlier. His reckless conduct caused Kelly's death. Then came the elaborate, calculated cover-up to hide the crime. January 2018, 5 years after Kelly Dwyer vanished. The trial for her murder was about to begin.
Chris Zacco will see his 90th birthday before he gets out of prison for his role in Kelly Dwyer's death.
He deserves to live a long, long life in jail, hopefully tortured by the choices he's made.
Along with her father and sister, Kelly Dwyer's mother asked the judge for the maximum sentence.
When your daughter goes missing for 1.5 years with no clue as to where she is, that is torture beyond belief.
Justice finally arrived in a crowded courtroom filled with family, friends, media, and the public. Kelly's family sat present throughout, waiting for answers they'd been denied for half a decade. Milwaukee County prosecutors presented their comprehensive theory. Chris Zacco had engaged in a pattern of dangerous sexual behavior, a pattern dating back years, involving multiple partners. The prosecution called other women to testify about their experiences with Chris. These women described extremely risky, dangerous sexual acts. They recounted being taken to the brink of death for sexual gratification, a reckless disregard for their safety, a pattern of strangulation and breath restriction during sex, behavior that could easily cause death. Prosecutors argued that on the night of October 11, 2013, Chris went too far with Kelly. He engaged in the same dangerous sexual behavior shown in the video from 3 weeks earlier, the video where Kelly couldn't breathe, where she appeared in visible distress. That night, his reckless conduct killed her. The theory: strangulation or suffocation during a sexual act. Not premeditated murder, reckless homicide. Chris caused Kelly's death through dangerous, reckless sexual behavior. Then came the cover-up. After Kelly died in his apartment, prosecutors argued, Chris wrapped her body in the shower curtain, explaining the torn hooks. He placed her body inside the large golf bag. Over an 8-hour period, he loaded items into his car trunk. He drove to his mother's house, establishing an alibi. He stayed overnight at his secret girlfriend's house with Kelly's body locked in the trunk outside. The next morning, October 12th, he drove to rural Wisconsin. During a 90-minute unaccounted gap, he disposed of her body. He bought cheese at the Mouse House, creating a paper trail alibi. He bought new sneakers at Sports Authority, replacing shoes contaminated with evidence. The evidence mountain prosecutors presented was staggering. The disturbing video from 3 weeks before showing Kelly in distress, unable to breathe. Multiple photos of Kelly unconscious on Chris's bed. Cadaver dog alerts throughout the apartment. The bed, hallway, parking garage, car trunk, dumpster area. The missing golf bag, identified by his girlfriend who described its size and location. Missing bathroom items, shower curtain, rug, towels. Timeline reconstruction through surveillance footage, credit card receipts, cell phone records. Chris's cell phone deliberately turned off during critical disposal times. Credit card receipts time-stamped. Mouse House at 9:55 a.m., Sports Authority at 12:11 p.m. Kelly's body found in Jefferson County, 6 miles from the Mouse House route. Her skeleton's contorted position consistent with golf bag compression. The 90-minute gap occurring exactly where her body was discovered. The defense presented their arguments. No eyewitness to Kelly's death. No DNA evidence directly linking Chris to murder. No CSI moment with a definitive proof. The defense argued the video showed consensual sexual activity, comparing it to the popular book 50 Shades of Grey. Kelly could have left the building during camera blind spots or gaps. A witness claimed seeing Kelly alive that weekend after October 10th. The cadaver dog alerts couldn't be independently verified scientifically. Kelly was seeing multiple men, active on dating apps, could have been someone else. The golf bag was circumstantial, didn't prove murder. The entire case was built on circumstantial evidence with no direct proof. The prosecution's rebuttal was powerful. Every single piece of circumstantial evidence pointed directly to Chris Zacco. Security video was extensively reviewed. Kelly never exited the building despite Chris's claims. The cadaver dog was professionally trained. Death was confirmed in the apartment and car. The missing items were corroborated by his girlfriend's detailed testimony about the golf bag and shower curtain. The 90-minute timeline gap occurred precisely where Kelly's body was found 18 months later. The body's location fell exactly along the route between the Mouse House and Sports Authority. The skeleton's position confirmed the golf bag compression theory perfectly. Prosecutors delivered their closing. No other person could have done this. The circumstantial mountain is undeniable and overwhelming. The case was submitted to the jury. 12 jurors deliberated Kelly Dwyer's fate, reviewing all evidence, weighing the prosecution's theory against the defense's arguments. The deliberation lasted 3.5 hours. Tension mounted in the courtroom. Families waited. The jury returned. The judge asked for the verdict. The foreperson stood and announced Chris Zacco to be guilty on all counts. First-degree reckless homicide, guilty. Hiding a corpse, guilty. Strangulation and suffocation, guilty. The courtroom erupted in emotion. Then Kelly's family wept. Tears of relief, of grief, of justice finally served. Chris was visibly devastated. His head dropped into his hands. The 5-year legal journey was complete. He was a convicted murderer. But what would Chris Zacco's final sentence be? The judge pronounced Chris Zacco's sentence: 31 years in prison for reckless homicide and related charges, consecutive to the 19 years he was already serving for child pornography and drug convictions. Total combined sentence, 50 years in Wisconsin State Prison. Chris Zacco would be an elderly man if ever released. From the bench, the judge's words were clear. Demonstrated a danger to society, particularly to women. A pattern of predatory, dangerous behavior, reckless disregard for human life. The elaborate cover-up showed consciousness of guilt. The sentence reflected both the severity of his crimes and the need to protect the public. But this case was never really about Chris Zacco. It was about Kelly Dwyer, a vibrant 27-year-old woman full of life, a yoga instructor who loved helping others, always optimistic, and always seeing the best in people. Friends described her as a loving person who didn't find fault in anyone. She was a light in everyone's life. Her family's statement captured the magnitude of their loss. Profound, devastating. Kelly had been finding her way in life, building her future. She trusted the wrong person, and it cost her everything. The warning signs had been visible. A friend's instinctive reaction, that bad energy, that sense of danger, was correct. The bruises on Kelly's wrists and neck that she laughed off weren't accidents. Friends wished they'd pushed harder, been more insistent. Kelly's optimism prevented her from seeing the danger hiding behind Chris's successful professional facade, the tragedy of ignored red flags. After 5 years, justice was served. Kelly Dwyer's family finally had closure. Her body was recovered. Her killer was convicted and sentenced. Her memory honored. One word captures this entire case: tragedy. A vibrant life cut short. A family forever changed. But justice was ultimately served. Kelly Dwyer will always be remembered. If this case moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notification bell, and please, do share this Kelly Dwyer story so her memory continues to live on. And in the comments, let me know what warning signs you think all women need to pay more attention to, either on dating sites or just in general. Let's keep the conversation going, because stories like Kelly Dwyer's matters to all of us. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.